Hey, everybody. I want to say welcome. Uh, I see Dan's Creations and Adventures in here. Jeff Spalding, 351 Cleveland. Uh, Hopefully, more guys will start streaming in uh, as soon as they get notified. So we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get in here.
Yeah, and it's a busy night. You got Has live, and
Yeah,
people. I don't know if Patriot James is still live. He'll probably be ending up in a minute here, and
yeah,
you get the first couple of shows. People are still trying to find you, and
yeah.
it takes a bit to get everybody coming in, but
There's
I'm
Fishing with
sure.
the Squirrel.
There we go. What's up, Squirrel? There you go. Dan said it. Now, if you want to, the way that if you want to put a comment, you know how you see comments on the bottom of the screen?
Yeah, just click them.
Just click go on to Dan's Creations comment there and click that.
Yeah,
There you go. Perfect.
yeah.
That's exactly what Country Boy told me about. That's what he wants this to be. Yep.
Yeah. I figured that out doing my live streams by accident.
Okay.
There's Epic. Hey, Epic. Uh,
Well,
I I did it by accident on my live stream, and it took me forever to figure out how to get it off of there. So I learned that the hard way.
I got a little surprise for you. I know you're friends with Epic, and I think a lot of them just like I do, and we all do. We're gonna send him a link, give you a little practice on sending links during
Awesome.
and he's gonna come up with us for a little bit and just to get your show going and things like that. And I think it's gonna be a great thing for the community. I think Dan
I
said
love
it.
Epic.
Dan said it perfectly. Real catfishing knowledge and help, just what people need. And that's we try to do that on Friday nights with Creole and I, and I'm glad that there's you're the another one that's going to be focusing on that kind of thing, and that's just awesome.
Welcome, Mad Catter. Well, it's nice. Hey, Rex. It's nice for people to have a platform they can come into and ask questions and get answers. There are groups on Facebook, but a lot of times when
I'll be right back.
okay, when people go into these places on Facebook, these groups, and they're new and they don't know and they ask questions, some of those guys can be very hateful and very harsh. And I don't want that. People's got to learn. They've got to ask questions. That's how we all learn. And, I want them to have a place to go and a place to learn. Uh, you know, Dan, I don't know if I had made you a mod yet or not. I know I had made some, and I can't really see on here right now who's a mod and who's a not. Uh, I definitely want to get some going. I know I have some. Uh, I know Art and One Ton, and uh, I had Becca and Mike Turner. Hey, Dale. Yeah, exactly, Epic. Facebook isn't fun for everyone. Uh, some of those guys are real harsh. Uh, they put people down because of the size of their fish and stuff, and that's not what we're here for. I want people to be able to share, and I like being able to share knowledge with everybody and them learn. Hey, Dave, Justin, Aaron, Catfish Regulators, what's up? Georgia Fishermen. But I want people to be able to come and share their experiences because a trophy catfish depends on where somebody's at. They may catch a 8-pound fish. That's the biggest fish in their area. And they're so excited about it. And they go to share that on one of them Facebook groups or somewhere, and people run them down, call it a baby, should have threw it back. Guys, that's not what we're about here. I don't want none of that. Looks like Timmy Chesapeake Bay's in. Dale
That's
Hastings,
awesome.
Eddie Gross, Michael Murillo. I don't want people in the catfish community discouraging others and putting them down for their catch. We all have to start somewhere. And instead of belittling people and putting them down, let's reach out to these people and share knowledge with them and help them get on bigger fish or get on fish more consistently. Hey, Polar Bear, welcome. We want to share that knowledge.
And I want to just clear one thing up. I'm not going anywhere. It's from Friday nights. Creo is still my broadcast brother. Country Boy is also a good friend, and he was talking to me about wanting to get this started. And what am I going to do for a friend? I'm going to help them out. So that's why I'm here, helping Country Boy get this going and get it set up. And the things that he wants to do is right in line with what's important to a lot of us, and it's the fish and helping people and promoting that brother or sisterhood of supporting everybody and pushing people to that next level, or any questions they have, or it's about the fish and it's about the fishing and enjoying what you're doing. I heard Country Boy saying
exactly.
I got a picture a little while ago from one of my good friends that's out in chat, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't know if he wants me to bring it up, but he caught a beautiful, huge channel cat, 11 pounds, and that's a monster channel cat. And like you were saying, in some places that would be considered, man, that's a monster. Celebrate it. That's what we're here for, and that's I think that's awesome.
LG Bass is in the house. Hey, LG, welcome. You see what Epic? He said, "Big fish are in the eye of the beholder," and man, that's so very true. That's what it's all about. Someone's trophy may not be your trophy. Like you're just talking an 11-pound channel cat. Where I'm at, if you catch an 11-pound channel cat, you have done something. Our channel cats are not that big because we have such a blue, flathead, and silver cat populations. So our channel cats are usually smaller. Surfins, catfishing, welcome. Hey, Big Mike's in the house.
Wow, look there what Epic put up about you. These guys are shining stars of real catfishing with a great perspective. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very much. That means a lot, Tim. Yeah.
Epic. 10 pounds was a monster to me at one time. Exactly. There's P City and Valerie and
P City, another one. My good friend, my Smith brother, P City Smitty there. He's out there.
He has been smashing them flatheads. I can't get flathead spots because it's all red clay roads around the lake here. Like I'm literally going through pastures and trees to get to them. And, we've had so much rain that it stays muddy. And if it's not muddy, we got 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. So I'm watching P City and I can't get to my flathead spots, and he's putting a hurting on me. I see him catching flatheads and stuff, and he's the me into withdrawals.
He's the perfect example of that. He didn't grow up catching catfish or flatheads and stuff, and took some information, kept going on it, put time on the water, kept learning more about it, and now look, I mean, he's got that. He's got that often imitated, never duplicated PC Smitty windshield catfish scorekeeper.
Yeah,
that is just the most awesome idea.
That was an awesome idea. It went over so big, and I see Brandon with Catfishing Dreams is in. Hey, Brandon. P City with that scorecard. First thing everyone asks is, how many have you caught? What's your biggest fish? As soon as you turn on his stream, you see that scorecard there. and it helped so much. And it went over. It's a big success. I see a lot of guys that are going to try and figure out a way to duplicate that in some way because it is such a success and such a help.
Man, you got a bunch of people out here. Bunch of people already, Country Boy. Awesome.
Yeah, I see Mario Sanchez made it in.
Fish hunt Trapper Pete. Awesome lifestyle there. Welcome,
guys. Guys, while everyone's in here, I got to give a little shout out. The other day, I was on Eric Massey's Jig Time channel, and I won some jigs, and they come in today, and I want to show y'all some of these. I mean, these things are on fire. They are so beautiful. He really does great quality work. Even the head is two-tone. I'm super excited about getting to try these different jigs. He sent me 3 different colors, and man, they are just awesome. When I first laid eyes on them, I was so shocked and so excited. They've got a lot of flash to them, and down here, some of these local lakes we have, they don't stock them with catfish. We're trying to get them to, but they stock bass and sawguy and crappie and stuff like that. So these jigs will come in real handy for me because I'm trying to get away from the artificial baits and or the live baits and start using more artificial baits. And I know a lot of guys in the catfish community say, well, if you're a catfisherman, why are you fishing for crappie and stuff? If you want to be a successful catfisherman, it's bait. Your bass and your crappie and your bluegill make excellent baits. So the better you are at bait fishing, the better you're going to be at keeping bait for catfish. I see Paul Meadow in. Hey, Kevin.
Paul Meadow, wow. Country Boy, you bring up a good point there, because if you ain't catching bait, you're fishing with chicken. You know what I'm saying?
See, that's the point I'm at now. For the first time in many years, our lakes finally froze over this year, and we had a shad kill, which we don't normally have down here. And the shad have been few and far between, and everybody is struggling to get on the shad. Bluegill, with the water going up and down constantly with the rain, it's hit and miss. So it's a sad reality of fishing. If you don't have bait, no fishing. I see Skip with Clear Views in, and living outdoors. But if you don't have bait, you're not going to get to fish. And
those colors he sent you, that chartreuse or yellow and black, that is one of my favorite jig colors for summertime. You find banks, you fish that along the banks, especially banks that have flowering bushes, fruit trees, bushes like that. What goes to those is those bumblebees. Well, those big bumblebees drop off in that water, that yellow and black. That is one of the best jig colors, fishing banks, that you will ever find. And then he sent you those other 2, which are more of a minnow type. So he's got you shallow, he's got you deep. You've got your set. That's some great colors there.
I see Miss Laura the Explorer is in here. Welcome, Laura. Yeah, up to that point, if I can't catch bait, I'm going to be using the glizzies and the chicken. I've got to, excuse me, you got to have something. Hey, there's Miss Chrissy Brown.
Yes, Palmetto brings up a good point there that I try to repeat after I say things, or say it before I say some things. He says, unless it's illegal, always check your regulations for the states you're in. Some states allow you to use game fish for bait.
Yep.
Some states you can cut it. Some states it's got to stay whole. Some states don't allow it at all. So always check the regulations where you're at. You know, if you can't find it in the book, call the local office. They've been more than happy to help you out and explain things to you. Go to local bait shops. They
Yeah.
want you to catch fish. They'll help you out with things. You know, always check your regulations before you try some of those other baits. That's for sure.
In Oklahoma, we're kind of lucky. They will let you use about anything. We can use crappie, goldfish, crawdads. You can use carp. You can use shad, bluegill, just about anything that you could imagine for bait. Oklahoma will let you use it. And so we're lucky there because a lot of places don't. It makes the bait situation even harder. But we are lucky enough that they let us use multiple baits. And at certain times of the year, one is golden and it will work better than the others. There's no magic bait. There's no bait you can take with you that is 100% of the time gonna produce fish. Uh, you know,
And just because it worked 2 days ago doesn't mean it's going to work today. So,
yeah.
you know, you always got to be prepared for different things, different size baits, different species of bait.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing people need to get in their heads too. Uh, Guys, just because you catch fish in a spot one time does not mean the fish are always going to be there. Uh, Fish move, especially in the lakes and reservoirs. They move constantly. And just because they're there yesterday does not mean you're going to go back out today and get on them. You have to learn their patterns, know where they're going to be at certain times of the year. What are they doing? Are they feeding? Are they spawning? Is it pre spawn? Is it post spawn? Are they getting ready to go into their wintering holes? You know, stuff like that. You'll never get LG Bass to use a bass. I don't know. Poor LG Bass, he has been on the catfish.
Woo! Him and
He is,
Aaron.
yeah, he's been hammering it. We got to get LG a catfishing name. I mean, and you know, poor Art and them one time they go out and they take LG with them, and the bass guy fishing the catfisherman. And it just looks. We need to have a catfish name for him. I see Mike Irvin made it in. Hey, Mike.
What's up, Mike?
Uh,
Man, you got a bunch of great people in here, country boy. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I appreciate everyone stopping in. And guys, I get a lot of questions about fishing line, braid or mono. And I know this is a topic that's sensitive to people, but this is my first live stream. I'm going to throw it out there and hash it out and give you my opinion on it and why. And I'll explain why. I do not use braid. I tried braid before, but a lot of the places I fish, there's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of stumps. Even if you don't see them on top of the water, they're underwater. Hey, Big Slim, and those rocks and those stumps wreak havoc on braid. Uh, hey, Matt, want to be outdoors? I tried braid. I will never use it again because I hate losing fish, and I don't want a fish swimming around with a hook in its mouth. Now there are some places that people fish. I see a lot of guys run the braid, and they have success with it because they're not in rough water or in the thick cover. I've seen guys use braid main line and a mono leader. But I really like mono because it's got stretch and mono is real abrasion resistance. The reason I like the stretch, you've got some flex in your rod and you got the drag on your reel. But if your drag is not set right and a big fish hits your rod and your drag is too tight, he's going to either pop your line or he's going to pull that hook loose. And I don't want that. You can always tighten your drag up when fighting a fish. But the mono, it gives you stretch combined with the flexibility of the rod and then the drag of the reel. So you just improved your chances 3 times greater of landing that fish. When you add the abrasion resistance, if you've ever got into the big catfish guys, you know what their teeth are like. It's like sandpaper. They will take the hide off of you. Well, that mono, it stands that. It's made for the abrasion. Hey, Creole's in here, and that's why I love mono. I've used it for years. I've used the Berkley Big Game Trilene is what I use. I have caught 50 and 60 and 70 pound fish on 25-pound big game mono. Currently, because I know there are bigger fish out there, mainline, what I use is a 40-pound mainline and a 60-pound leader, and I got a 200-pound rated barrel swivel. So I know that's overkill with the 200-pound barrel swivel, but I'd rather have more than I need than not have enough. And that's just me. And guys in chat, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I want to be able to share information with all y'all, and the guests share information with y'all, so that y'all become better. You know, Stan, you fish a lot of river. The James River.
Yep.
Has lots of big fish in it. So y'all not only target structure, but y'all have current to deal with.
One of the most important things, yeah.
Yeah, and y'all follow the current because the current tells you where you need to fish and stuff. You know, so you look for certain things in a river that I look for that's different in a lake. We have no current in our lakes. The main deciding factor in the lakes is the wind direction, because the wind controls the plankton. Well, that controls the shad, the bait fish, and where are the feeding fish going to go? They're going to follow them bait fish, and so that's stuff I look for. I still look for structure, rocks, stumps, ledges, anything like that is great. But you know, bank fishing and river fishing is completely different. You still look for structure and stuff, but it's two different beasts. So if you're a lake fisher and you're going to the river, find you some guys that fish the rivers and get information from them. Learn from them. Got a question from Justin up here. CBC, what is your favorite bait? Justin, in our bodies of water, gizzard shad is the primary bait. So gizzard shad is my favorite bait. A very, very close second is bluegill. Just about everything eats bluegill. And if they're in that body of water, they're also a good bait. But shad is one of my favorite baits.
Yeah, it's hard to beat if you have gizzard shad in your water, or threadfin shad, or whatever that shad species is that's in that particular water. Yep. 99 times out of 100, that is going to be that primary food source for your bigger catfish. You know, and then it goes from there to your bluegill, like just like Country Boy was saying, especially for the flatheads that are kind of in that same, they kind of live in that same area that bluegill, and they kind of like that structure, and that's why bass, I hate to say it, but that's why the bass and the things like that make such a good bait for flatheads especially, is, well, they all live in that same kind of area, and that's the that's what the flatheads are sitting there waiting to ambush. But shad is hard to beat. If that's in your waters, shad is going to be that #1 bait. Up north, I know we have a lot of there's a lot of like golden shiners, and you know, they can grow pretty good sized shiners. So if that's the main food source, that's the main bait fish that's in that body of water, that's what
Yep.
you want to look for. That's going to be the primary. Then it goes, off to the different season and what's where and what's, from there. But
That's exactly why I don't use braid, LG. I've got too many rocks and stumps and sunken timber. I fish some nasty water, and I lose a lot of tackle, but I fish that nasty water on purpose because I know what lives there.
okay.
Here it's skipjack, white bass, drum,
Yep.
bluegill, then gizzard shad. Yeah, Big Mike, I wished we had skipjack here. I watch y'all go out and catch skipjack, and I hate to tell you, but I could go out there with an ultralight rod and have the time of my life filling the bait cooler just catching skipjack. Moon eye, skipjack. Moon eye, skipjack, the whitefish, etc. All the way down to stuff nobody has ever heard of. Yeah, there's lots of baits that guys fish with, like creek chubs and stuff. Man, I had no idea. When I started watching Chunky and them fish with eel, had no idea. I never once thought of using carp for cut bait till I seen Haz and them use it. There's things you can learn, guys, and I watch all these live streams not just to show support, but I'm learning from these guys. There's things that I can try.
Yep.
Tim Molina made it in, and Uncle Lou. Uncle Lou has a question. Which do you prefer in lakes, the channel or flats between them? Uncle Lou, it depends what time of the year it is. This time of the year, the spring of the year, man, I would be on the flats because I know that's where the catfish are going to pull up to spawn, especially old road beds that's got the hard gravel bed to them. The catfish love that. And down here, when they built some of these lakes, when they flooded them, all the concrete bridges and stuff are still on them roads under there. And man, them big flatheads and stuff will get up under them old concrete bridges, and that's where they call home. And if you know the areas where these roads and stuff were, you can get on the fish.
Yeah, and lakes, what I like in lakes, if you can find a lake that has deep water with a ledge that goes to a flat and it has mud flats, and then you have like lily pads and weeds and stuff, so you got more structure. If you can find all that in a general area, those fish, that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to hit deep water, they're going to come up the ledge, they're going to move off into them flats, hit the weeds when the suns come out and get a little bright, up into the shade, down to the deep water. They'll be making that constant circle around. If you can find areas that's got that kind of structure for them in a close proximity, that's where I'd be targeting lakes.
Well, see, that's what I do, because like right now, our weather pattern is so messed up. It's one day and 40 the next. So these fish are confused. They don't know what's going on. They want to pull up and spawn, and then it gets cold and it pushes them back out. So if you can find a channel of deep water near the shallow flats where you know they want to spawn at, that would be my number one spot to target with the weather fluctuating like this, because they have access to deep water and they have access to shallow water without having to move very far. And they'll stay in that area because, to put it slightly, they got the best of both worlds. They can go back and forth, and that's stuff to look for. Creek channels can be spot on sometimes. Like when the creeks and stuff flood, and flow into the lakes here. That creek channel runs all the way through that lake, all the way to the dam. When that new fresh water starts coming in, it triggers them fish, and they will pull to that creek channel, and they will follow it to where that fresh water is coming in. And that's stuff you learn, stuff to look for. The people use lamprey. Polar bear, I'm not even sure what that is.
Lamprey eels they can get whatever sizes, but a lot of them will start out smaller, and they use them a lot up north. So eel, but it's got these. It's got like a suction cup on the front, and it's got rings of teeth in there, and they'll suck onto the side of a fish like a parasite, and they have teeth, and they suck the blood out of it. But they're awesome bait for bass, trout, catfish. They're full of blood. That's what they do. So if you ever see fish from up north that have like a ring wound on the side of it, chances are it's from a lamprey eel that had been attached on the bottom of that thing. So
see, guys, you're never too old to learn. I just learned something new. I see Big Country made it in, and 3+1. Welcome, guys. Thank y'all for coming in.
Country boy, whenever people that love to fish, we all get we get off and we start talking about fishing. But I want to bring it back for just a second. The reason that we're up here tonight, Creole, no worries. I'm still Friday night. You're still my broadcast brother. I'm just helping Country Boy out here getting going. But Country Boy is starting his new show. He's going to do it Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. Going to be focusing on the fish and fishing, and not just catfish. So I believe the name is Fishing 101.
Yes.
And it's gonna, he's gonna be talking about fishing and having guests up, and main focus, just like you hear, it's gonna be talking about all different kinds of aspects of fishing. You can't, to be a good cat fisherman, you got to catch bait. Well, that may be topics that Country Boy is going to talk a lot about, and obviously catfishing stuff. So it's going to be Wednesdays at 9 o'clock. It's going to be Fishing 101 with Country Boy. I think it's a great idea. He's got a lot of knowledge, and good for him for wanting to share that out and bring people in. And
and I want to get a lot of knowledge out there for the bank fishermen, especially. There's not a lot of information out there for the bank fishermen. So I want them to be able to come in and have a place where they can ask questions and see different techniques that people use. Know where to go fish on your body of water. Just because there's water there does not mean there are fish there. There's dead spots that you can fish as long as you want. They're just not going to be productive. You got to know where the productive water is and what to look for. Hey, Maurice Kaysen. I see Ohio Catfish Chasers made it in. So, guys, if I missed any questions in chat, throw them back up, because if you have any questions, I want to make sure we get it answered. Here's one from Vibes. Which is better, live bait or cut bait? Because I've gotten my PB on a live perch, but most of the fish on cut bait. Vibes, again, a lot of that has to do with what time of the year it is. In the spring, and even in the summer, your live baits can be gold. I mean, from spring until the end of summer, you will see me with at least one live bait on one of my rods all the time. But in the wintertime, the live bait kind of slows down, and the cut bait bite is real hot. But you still can catch them in the winter, spring, and summer on live bait or cut bait. But during the spring, I prefer the live bait, and during the winter, I prefer cut bait. Stan, what about you?
I'm laughing because I used to, I'd ask Epic Tim Scott questions, and you can't just ask a generic question because it all depends on what you're, there's variables with everything. So, and, going back to me, I target fish. So it depends on what fish you're targeting too. Flatheads will love that live bait, or they will take fresh cut bait. Like we've caught a bunch of flatheads on fresh cut bait. Stan 3's 50-something pound flathead that he caught earlier in the year was on fresh cut gizzard shad. I mean, it was still, the heart was still going, the blood was still coming out of that cut bait. So Epic will tell you, even up to 3 hours after the dead, there's still electrical impulses coming out of that cut bait. So it can simulate a live bait. They still will have that properties of a live bait for up to 3 hours. So, but again, it depends. Yep, and the fresh skin, the fresh slime, the fresh scent, everything. Yep, but again, it depends on what you're targeting. Blues we tend to catch a lot more blues on cut bait, and there go again. It depends on your body of water. So you take what you hear from us talking about our own bodies of water, and it may be a little different in what you're fishing for. So you try out what the tried and true things are, and if it's not working, you switch it around a little bit. But I really don't think if you can go wrong. Fresh and but my opinion, the cut bait is fresh. The key with cut bait is fresh. A lot of people disagree with that, but I in my opinion, fresh cut bait is
it's always better. I see Kelly Bullock and Chunky made it in. Hey, Chunky. Dan's creation. He's got David point out there is a difference between a lake and creek bait fishermen and these active river fishermen. Yeah, guys, fishing the river and fishing the lake, like I said earlier, it's two different beasts. There's different things you got to look for. There's different things you got to be aware of. On the rivers and the creeks, you have the current and the current seams, and that controls a lot. Stan, I know on the river, explain to them on the river what you mainly look for.
Well, again, that's it's going to depend on what we're between lake, creek, and bank fishermen. Like on a bank is tough, no matter where you fish, whether you fish a lake, a creek. Creek is about the one spot where there isn't boats, so you have that opportunity. You're going up and down the bank, but you're looking for the same type of things. You've got moving water, you've got deep pools, you've got shallow flats. You have them in creeks, you have that in rivers. It depends on what time of the year, what the weather conditions are. You get a cold front come in or that colder water. Fish will tend to move back out from shallow into the deeper water. This past weekend we had wind, but it was a bright, sunny day, and the water was heating up. It's close to spawn, so a lot of those fish had came up out of the deep, and we caught most of our fish this past weekend in shallower water with proximity to deep water. So they were moving up into that kind of pre-spawn, getting ready for that spawn to be started up here. But if you can find, especially in rivers, you find the areas you're looking for current first. Got to have some sort of movement in the water. You don't want it to be too much. You don't want it to be too little. It's got to have some sort of movement or availability to that. Then the depth of the water. Well, we knew we had anchored up and we were fishing deeper water, and a couple little bump, nothing. So that's why we moved. We changed our technique. We went up to there was it kind of came from the main river, and it was an offshoot that came down and connected back, because the James in this section kind of loops around like this. So we fished a straight line. There was an offshoot that came, and it kind of connected between the two. So that's where we drifted down through there, and that's where we started catching them. That's where I caught that 20-plus pounder minutes before Stan 3 caught his 63-pounder. It was because we tried that deeper water, wasn't right. It wasn't the right current, wasn't the right situation with the weather. So, you know, you always got to be thinking, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah.
What's not right? What do we got to change to go move to a different spot? That's where boat, you kind of have that advantage. You can go move to those different spots. But even on the bank, it's harder work.
But it can't be done.
You want to try to have those different spots available. Like if you know that it's warmer weather and the fish are moving and they're going to be a little shallower, you want to have those bank spots where you can fish that.
Yeah.
You know, if it's cold front, cold weather, things like that, they're not going to be as shallow. They're going to move out a little bit. So that's what you want to look for at a bank spot, no matter what no matter what you're fishing, river, lake, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so there's similarities, and you know, you just gotta focus on, you know, pick it up, spend the time on the water.
It's like a chess game.
Yes, yeah.
You're playing chess with the fish. Big Country, he asked, what do you look for in reservoirs? Big Country, my favorite is timber, standing timber, fallen timber, and rocks. Just because that type of structure, I know the fish key in on it. Different times of the year, you're going to look for this structure in different areas. If they're in deep wintering holes, if you can find a hole that has the deep channel and it also has either stumps or rocks, I like to fish those areas. They're very productive. Look for your channel ledges. Any of that is different kinds of structure. It's changes in the contour, as Epic said.
Incoming
Yes.
water from like a creek, anything.
Yep. It does not have to be drastic. That water may only change 2 foot, but that 2 foot makes a lot of difference to that fish. And but I still target structure because I know that's where the fish are going to hang out. There's certain times of the year where I go and I look for docks, old broken down bridges, concrete bridges that were buried underwater that's got the overhead cover, because I know them fish are going to be tucked back in it. So I hope that answered your question, Big Country. See if we have any more questions in here. I don't want to miss anybody.
If there isn't any questions right there, I said Epic was going to come up for a minute. On the bottom of do you know how to send the link out?
I don't know if I have Epic on Facebook. I think I do.
Well,
I'm not sure if I have him.
To add to that, is frozen bait really that different from fresh bait? Like, is it much of a difference?
It's very much different. Stan, I don't know how to do that. When I went to invite him, it almost shut me out of the stream. So,
well, here's what you can do. You can post. You're allowed to post into chat and things like that. And
okay.
What you can do, let's see, across the bottom. Trying to do it from memory now. There should be one about where it said to invite guests, like we did yesterday, and then you hit copy to clipboard. Even if something happens, Country Boy, and you go out, the stream will keep going. You just have to come back. You just have to come back into it. It really won't hurt anything.
It copied it to the clipboard.
Okay, now there should be on the bottom where you could hit chat.
No, it says Gmail, email, or messenger. Oh, down here. Okay.
And the chat should come up. You should be able to go over and hit paste over into the comment bar.
There we go.
And that should put the link for the stream. There you go. You did it.
All right.
Now, what that'll do, you just got to be careful with that because that's the link to come up into the, when we were backstage before into the broadcast studio. And whoever clicks that, they'll come back there. So then when they come in there, you'll see a little number sign. It should say guest underneath your screen somewhere.
It just shows little icons of how many people you can have up, which display you want to use. And yeah, but Bob's, back to your question. We'll see if Tim comes in. Fresh bait makes a world of difference to frozen bait, especially you don't know how they process that bait when they froze it. And a lot of times when you unfreeze that bait, it's real soft and mushy. Here's Tim.
There we go.
The bait's real soft and mushy, and it's just not as effective as the fresh bait. Plus, your fresh cut bait, it puts off more of a scent than it does when it's been frozen. Frozen bait is better than no bait, but fresh will always be better than frozen bait.
And Creel brought up a good point before too. It depends on. He said he'd rather have a really good frozen bait than a mediocre bait. So he'd rather have a good frozen skipjack or as they call them down there, as opposed to like a threadfin shad fresh. Which that you can make those. You can make that statement, and a good frozen bait is going to be better than a mediocre fresh bait that they're not really feeding on. So.
Yeah. If they're not really feeding on a bait, guys, take chicken for instance. If they're not biting the chicken, you can throw that chicken out there all day long. It's not going to make them fish bite it. Don't be afraid to try different baits because there are certain baits that will work at certain times of the year and they work better than others. It goes back to what Tim Epic always says. Listen to what the fish are telling you. The fish will tell you what they want. You got to be paying attention. If you're sitting in a spot and you've been there and you've been fishing for 2 hours and you haven't got a bite, guys, you need to move. Either change baits, change the way you're rigged, change your location. But at that point in time, 2 hours into a fishing trip, if you have not caught a fish, the 911 alarm should be going off. Something should tell you something's not right.
Tim, you just got to be sitting over there smiling, hearing this 7 days a week, 7 nights a week. I can only imagine for somebody that has promoted this great sport of catfishing, and to the point that there's so many of us out here that have just been our little local guys and doing this and that we're kind of promoting that same thing now, kind of like taking that torch and trying to get it out to as many people.
And I wish you guys would quit saying little local guys. Just because you don't have 10,000 subscribers, that doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. Because honestly, the biggest thing to promoting catfishing is staying the course. It's staying close to the principles instead of trying to do all this crazy humanistic stuff like we started talking when you and I first started doing lives together, Stan.
Yeah.
If somebody can give people a good streamlined version of what catfish do, not what they don't, it's what they do that is important. And there's only one way to know that. It's either you can swim with the fish or you are a catfish psycho, in which you keep your mind trained on what you feel, what you look at, what you see, you talk to other people, you do all that stuff. So let's go back to this bait for a second. I have a little bit different take on this bait. If I'm targeting flatheads in large rivers, cut bait's fine as long as it's fairly fresh. And there's one other stipulation that I want. I want that slime coat to be still intact. I don't want it to be wet. I don't want it to be too dry. I don't want it to be whatever. I like that slime coat to be going, and I like it to be less than 3 hours old. I've actually stopped guide trips in the middle of it or in the first 2 hours and said, we got to go get more fresh bait. And when we do, that increases my bite ratio tremendously. Now think about this one. So sometimes you can go to small rivers and you cannot buy a cut bait bite. Can't buy a cut bait bite.
No.
Especially in the month of June. That's our pre-spawn. That's our month of pre-spawn. But yet go the next day to the big Mississippi River or the Illinois River system or another big river like the Tennessee, and all of a sudden you're catching them on cut bait again. Why is that? No one really knows, but I know it happens because if I go to the Rock, which is Rock River in Illinois is like one of the most famous catfish rivers in the whole United States. You can't hardly buy a cut bait bite on the Rock in June, but yet it's got a huge flathead population. So why can't I catch a flathead on some of the best shad, suckers, chubs, carp, whatever? Why can't I catch 10 fish on the Rock River, but yet I can go to the Mississippi River that same day or the next day and just whoop up on it? Why is that? Nobody really knows. So that just reminds me that I have to keep my mind open about all these other rivers around the United States, because when I was younger, I was fairly certain that I knew pretty much everything. Just like my kids think.
Yeah.
14 and 19, they pretty much know everything. But at one point, I thought I could argue in my corner that flatheads do not regularly eat cut bait, that it was an accidental situation. It's not. And I've known that now for 20 some years. But so remember, when somebody says, hey, you got to use Mad Tums past midnight on the Susquehanna or whatever, that might actually have a little truth to it, which is the craziest thing in the world, but still, as long as us guys that are out there teaching newer guys, and I'm not saying anybody in chat's new, they're all various experts on their own thing. I listen to everybody. I listen to them all, and they have little idiosyncrasies, and some of them say, well, I wish I could catch an 11 pounder. That just means, that doesn't mean that they're not as good as people that are on bigger rivers catching bigger fish. It's that maybe they're topping out on their fish. I've got a river right below my house that you'd be hard pressed to catch a 12-pound channel cat, which 12 pounder is pretty big, but it is connected to a big river about 80 miles south, and you have to have just the right water conditions. I mean, just the right water conditions to get 10 pounders all the way up by my house. And it happens about 1 out of every 5 or 7 years. Otherwise, you're stuck with locals. So I tried to catch, when I didn't know any better, I tried to catch flatheads on my local river until I could have almost just died of hunger at staying at the river and camping there and going here and going there, going farther south. I mean, I said it earlier, I dreamed at one time of catching a 10-pound fish, so that's one thing that all three of us realized is that, I mean, Country Boy Catfishing is on a lake in Oklahoma. You're on the James River, and I don't live on the Mississippi, but I fish it. So, Creole, he's in chat right there. He's got a big population of big fish, but there are people that have to travel even farther than I do to go even get a shot at big fish. So we don't look down on anybody. We celebrate it. We dance the catfish jig. I mean, it's like this. Hey, 10 pounds is great. But we all know that it doesn't matter what kind of fish you're on. Those monsters look fun. They do. They are fun. They're fun to chase. They're fun to talk about. They're fun to whatever. But as long as, people that are going in lives are keeping the catfish thing in a good, sensible manner, people will learn a lot faster, a lot more, and they will be on the kind of fish they want to be on
Yeah.
and I'm not saying even talking about what it has call them glizzies. That's not even a
Glizzies.
Yeah.
You can take hot dogs to your local strip mine. You can take hot dogs down here. You can catch some channel cats. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I'm telling you, I've told the story before. I was on a guide trip one time. We were on about our 57th channel cat between 5 and 15 pounds, and the bite was on. And my guide client's name was actually Stan at the time, and Stan says, "What do you think? Is it the bait or is it the location?" I said, "Actually, right now," because Stan went with me a lot of times. His name was Stanley Sachs. He was a circuit court judge up in Chicago. I said, "Actually, right now we're at the height of the spawn, and it wouldn't matter as long as it was location, as long as you put the bait in their face, it wouldn't matter if it's a ham sandwich." And Stan says, "Oh yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'll take my ham sandwich out right now." I crushed my ham sandwich over that, and it was like 30 seconds. So we had another 10-pound fish on. That's how that stuff works. But earlier than that and later than that, no go. I mean, we were at the pinnacle of the bite. I mean, we were on a situation where, if you anchor up 25 or 30 times, you're going to catch 65, 70 fish a day.
Yeah.
In
Well, and I
shot,
think a lot of
in
people,
2 to 3 feet, because it's a traffic jam effect. This isn't like a normal downriver thing. If I was normally downriver, I would expect to catch 10 or 15 a day, and the bites are going to be way pickier. And that is one thing, the difference between a lake and a river. Lakes, it's more difficult to pinpoint them. But in rivers, they can be a lot more picky with the bait because they're spoiled. They have more choices. Sean, Catfish Heroes, often says this: "Well, if I'm a catfish, I just don't want chubs today. I want really bloody shad." And that's what he says, because they can be so picky that they'll tap a certain bait but take another one down. And it forces guys like me that fish those situations to keep their mind open, because yesterday they hit the tail of a chub, this big, but today they're only pecking a couple times and spit it, whatever. But as the spawn comes on and the competition gets heavier, this is so weird, it's backwards, competition gets heavier, then all of a sudden they have no choice. They can't be as picky and hit and spit and do all that other crazy stuff. So on lakes, they're more forgiving about the type of bait, but it's way more difficult to find them because they have more room. The competition isn't there. They can swarm in and swarm out. And a lot of people, if Dan's Creations in here, he's been talking about this a long time. He says, "Yeah, let's see those river fish come to my lake and do what they do." And I told him, I said, there's no way a river fisherman or any fisherman is going to swoop into a lake and average 50 to 60 to 70 channel cats during the pre-spawn and catch a whole bunch of blues without having a little bit of luck. But you do have to know the patterns and the predispositions of what's going on, so that when you get there, you're at least close. You're at least fairly close. Because if you're like a mile away, well, then you got a whole lot of searching to do. But if you can listen to people like Stan and like Country, like David, then you can be close when you get there. And that's a lot of the battle.
Yep. Well, it's like people don't understand on a lake, there's lots of dead water on that lake. There are too. Yeah, and I mean, there's certain areas of the water that they only use for travel corridors at times. The only time you catch them there is when they're moving. And there's water there, you won't catch them there at all. And, you've got to be open-minded, and you would be surprised what you can learn if you just shut up and listen to people. That's like, Tim, you have a wealth of knowledge. So anytime you get to come on a show or we get a chance to talk to you, I'm in awe, because it's just all this information and stuff that you have that's shared out there, and the catfish community and most people that fish, they have not a clue. Uh, you know, I guarantee you, most of the guys that fish my area have no idea what CPR is. They have no idea that it takes a blue cat 8 years to start breeding. Uh, they learn from what their dad did, and he learned from what his dad did, and no one's ever been there to educate them and break that cycle. And the rivers have a lot more bigger fish in them than your lakes. Uh, they produce larger numbers of big fish than the lakes do. So, well, most of the time. But the lakes,
Except,
with these people taking these big
except
fish out. Go ahead.
except for, at least where I'm at, lakes actually have some sort of regulations, whereas the rivers do not. So, my river fish are, or our river, it's all of our river fish. And I don't say me, I just say me because I kind of live kind of close, but they're susceptible to no regulations, whatever anybody wants to do to them. I mean, you could literally spearfish them and throw them in the back of your truck and throw them
Wow.
as you're going down. The only thing you would get in trouble for is littering. But do remember one thing. Lakes and rivers are very similar in the way that catfish, especially big ones, only accept a certain amount of habitat in the entire environment that they live in. Okay, so they are going to maximize their habitat so that they can be fed more easily and they don't have to do as much work. So when it's down to current, or current plus cover plus depth, or the other way around, current, depth, then cover, depending on the time of year, you can pretty much put that equation together. And Stan has really taken a thing to that, because bank angling, and I asked you guys in chat, I said, Dave, CBC, I said, could you explain the biggest issue with bank angling? And I didn't make myself clear, so I should make myself clear right now. The biggest issue to bank, and you guys are both bank anglers for the most part.
Yeah.
The key to success on bank angling isn't necessarily where you choose looking on the map, but it is a little bit. The biggest success is, are the fish, are they active enough to take a bait into their mouth? That's first. And second, are fish moving and feeding? Because you've got the three situations you've got, and it doesn't matter whether it's a lake or a river, same thing. You've got a situation where either fish are actively feeding and moving. That's your best case scenario. Your second case scenario is they've moved into the spot and they are occupying that spot, and they're not really moving, but they'll move in small increments and feed. Or you got no fish at all. That's it. Those are your three situations when you're bank angling. And so if you can figure out if there's no fish at all, you best move. If you've got there and the bite was hot and heavy for 25 minutes, and you caught a whole bunch of fish and all of a sudden it stopped, that means you got no moving fish. But if you're constantly getting some bites in 10, in 5, in 20, in 30 minutes, that means they're moving
in and out
voraciously. You got a lot of fish going, because they can't be sitting there like a pile of cordwood in the warmer water situation. In the winter, they
exactly
can't. You're like hit on a wintering hole, and there's all kinds of fish, but you're only going to catch about 10% of them. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So whenever you're choosing whether to stay or whether to go, it's that bite, that length of time in between bites. If it's fairly quickly, even though if it's just taps and you're not catching them, that just means their activity level is lower, but yet they're actively searching out food. If you're just getting nothing, best move. But if you can figure that out, if you can do the Shaolin hook set, if you can, downsize your baits, if you can get smaller hooks, if you can lighten up your sinkers, you can use longer rods, you can cast out and reach out. And I've seen both of you do it. I'm not teaching you anything new. We're just talking, to say, okay, that it's a little bit of validation, because I spent years on the bank. I mean, years fishing power plant lakes, fishing regular lakes, fishing little rivers, fishing big rivers, climbing out on the end of wing dikes, and the river be coming up and flooding all my stuff. I almost lost a tackle box one time because it come up so fast. But I mean, staying overnight, sleeping in hammocks, doing all that stuff. It was an awesome time. And you know what? I get to relive some of that through everybody else, because I see people doing it on their videos, and I hear of it, and I love it. All right. I'm sorry. I could just keep talking.
That's all right.
No,
we like to listen. To me, I always tell people 2 of the biggest factors in whether you're successful or not fishing is timing and location. If the fish are not in the wintering holes, you can sit there and fish them wintering holes all you want. You're not going to catch them. You got to be where the fish are. And that's another thing, timing. Time on the water is going to teach you, like right now, the bite early in the morning is on and late afternoon till dark. After dark, it's still shutting off. But there will become a time when the night bite is on. You have to know when the time is to go, because I've seen people fishing a spot and not catch anything, and they'll pull out and leave. And I'll be coming back around, and I'll go to the same spot they were in with the exact same bait, catch fish, all because it was a matter of time. They were there before the fish got there. You have to know, you pattern your fish, know where they're going to be at certain times of the day. A lot of that is controlled by your weather, and you've got to learn stuff.
Bite window.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
Was that Crocodile Dundee thing he used to do? The cow crossing the road. It's kind of like that. It is kind of like that bite window, and that bite window is either real small in the cold water period, in the morning, in the evening, maybe even the afternoon when the sun is the brightest. Yeah, I have a scientific theory about that, but nobody's been able to give me any sort of scientific evidence that it actually happens in catfish. They just give me other things in like pike or whatever. So I have to believe that at some period in the wintertime, and I know we're over that, but they will actually sun themselves. I do believe they can keep themselves maybe a little percentage above the water temperature. We don't know that yet. Sharks can, pike can, why can't catfish? And they're known to actually sun themselves a little bit. So let's get back to what you guys were saying. And you guys were saying that whole thing. You got to go, okay, you got to know your timing. And this is true. But let's just say this one. Sometimes you just got to go.
Yeah.
No matter what, the barometer's high and you got bluebird skies. And, because, and I know this because, I know what my odds are when I step out that door. I could be in the house, don't even look. I know what my odds are, pretty close, but I've been wrong, dead wrong a few times in my life. There's been bluebird skies. It's June 15th, and there's kind of a half-assed cold front coming in. I got 3 customers that are like flathead experts, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is gonna be terrible. And we end up catching 2
turns out to be your best trip.
A 42 at noon in the middle of the day. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
But
that's like me. I hate fishing. I hate fishing the north wind. And I decided I hadn't been able to go fishing in a while. And I was just determined, north wind or not, I'm going fishing. So I went to this spot. And when I went live, I told everybody, I said, guys, we're probably not going to catch anything. And before I could spit them words out, the rod started going down. And I was like, well, you never know.
Well, it's because there's so many variables. We'd go nuts trying to think of every single variable by itself.
Stan,
Stan,
just let me worry about all the variables, and I'll try to pass them on to you because I'm already done.
Yeah.
Like the barometric pressure, it changes twice a day. There's small change in that twice a day, regardless of what the weather does. It's from the heat and cooling of the earth. you know,
Well,
there's.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say one thing. Stan has tides. So
Tide.
his equation is like my equation with the power of 2, like the little 2
Yeah.
on the end, you know, the E
Yeah.
equals MC squared with the
Yeah.
square. So Stan's is that because he's got an ebbing and he's got an incoming and he's got a waning and ebbing or however that's worked. So it's coming. So, you know, 25% of the day, you got to be in the other direction if you're in a boat. So 1/4 of the day, you're one way. The other quarter, you're the other way. And then all of a sudden, you're the other quarter the other way and the other quarter the other way.
And then you throw wind. Then you throw wind into it that's blowing the wrong direction, and then you know you got a whole nother.
That's why you see them bite windows with Haslife and Fishing Magician and Chunky and them that fish the Potomac because they have that tidal river, and you got tide coming in and tide going out, and you'll see them. The bite will be on fire, and then the tide will start going out, and it'll slack, and then the tide will start coming back, and it'll be on fire again. Because they're sitting in the same spot, but the fish are traveling back and forth.
I can tell my static is building up again. So I'm going to get out. If you send me another link, I'll get back in.
All right.
All right.
I'll post another one, Tim.
Okay.
Okay. You're popping another one out there. Now I see Dan's out there saying he's at his 3rd lake. Let's try to help Dan.
A lot of Dan's problem, the lakes he fishes up there around Oklahoma City, I know some of them, they do have catfish in them, but you don't have overwhelming populations of them. If you go to a lake that has a high population of catfish, you're going to increase your odds way better. If you're fishing a 10,000 acre lake and it has 2,000 fish in that 10,000 acres, you're spreading your chances thin because that fish, you almost have to be perfect at the exact right time, exact right place to get them. To where if you go to a lake that has an abundance of fish, you're going to up your chances. I know some guys don't have a choice. You can only fish lakes that are near you. Guys, it's tough. It's a struggle. That's where you just got to pattern the fish, know where they're supposed to be, know what they're doing. Are they feeding this time of year? Are they spawning? What's going on with the fish? Because what's going on with the fish will tell you what you need to do.
Yeah, and I don't know the weather in Oklahoma right now and what the fish are doing, but Dan, are you you hear me talk, y'all hear me talk a lot about target. Like I targeted that 10-inch channel cat. I really did. I targeted it. I knew there was we wanted a small fish, cut down on the size of the bait. I went to the strawberry chicken bait because that's a good attractor for a channel cat. But target it, you almost always got to think of it as like you're trying to hit a target. So Dan, if when you're out there, do you know the waters that you're fishing ahead of time? What depth are you fishing in? Are you trying to get to are you looking for cover? There's a whole bunch of things. A lot of people think you just go to the lake and throw something out, and sure, you're going to catch some now and then. But if what you need to do is try to target, okay, it's the water's warming up. The fish are going to be this time of year. Like I said, I don't know Oklahoma. Never been out there to fish out there. But I'll use my example right here. It's coming into pre-spawn. The water's warming up. You're having some good weather consistently. The fish are going to be moving up shallow. So I'm going to look for a shallow flat on like the edge of a deeper water spot. So that's where I'm going to target a lot of my bank rods or my bank fishing. I'm going to look for those spots. Is that the things, or are you just driving to a lake that has access and throwing poles out? If you throw out some variables there, we can probably, the places with cover aren't accessible from the bank. then you're going to have a lot of, you're going to have a lot of those cast and hope type situations. Try to find, but even every accessible point is going to have something, and some are going to be better than others. So if you can, I know that there's a lot of maps and what's the thing that everybody talks about that has the depths of the lakes and the water. Can't off the top of my head, I can't think of the name of what it's called, but there's going to be brush in some spots. Try to find those. Nate, thank you. And that'll greatly increase your chances if you can find something where you're at right now that can act as structure, something different that differentiates it from the rest of that lake. There was a bunch of studies, and it said that active fish only take up like 1%, 1 to 3% of the water that's of the entire body of water. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's some crazy small.
I know the exact numbers. Flatheads accept about 10% of the river and about 15% of lakes. Channel cats accept almost 40% of rivers and about 60% of lakes at times, and blues like about 25% of rivers and lakes about evenly. And that comes from the deep.
And now if we're talking about active fish,
yeah,
that number goes down.
It does. You could probably cut that by 25%. So you're probably more accurate on that. Except for there is a differentiation between flatheads and blues and channel cats, because blues and channel cats, they have a much bigger habitat than flatheads do. And flat, except for a few rivers, especially with slower current, the heavier the current, the less their percentage, which makes it easy for us guys that are, easier. Because I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. You could put your baits in front of 100 flatheads a day. You'd be lucky to catch 15 of them in a river.
Yeah.
And in a lake, because they're just not that active and willing to feed all the time. You got to catch it just right. I mean, Peace City is on a pretty spectacular situation. He's got a lower river, heavy flathead population, especially if he can be successful throwing towards the middle of the river. The Tennessee River is about the same. But once you hit those rivers that are like mature flathead populations, they will equilibrium themselves, and then add commercial fishing in. And I'm not throwing excuses here, but add commercial fishing in, it eliminates a lot of that population. So then there's not as much competition. So it's tougher. It's more like smaller natural rivers where I'm telling you, it's very difficult to catch them on cut bait. You can sling cut bait all day and not catch a flathead a lot of times. They got to be at the very active. They got to be very, very competitive in their zones. And that's the thing. The key to catching flatheads on cut bait is competition. Believe that or not. They don't naturally love cut bait. They do in the early part of the year because they're like snakes or lizards or whatever. Their metabolism is slow. They'll pick up the occasional piece of carrion because they're not all that. They don't have to chase anything. If they don't have to chase anything, you present something really good, blah, blah, blah. But once that water turns up, they'll turn their nose at it. They're like, I don't want that. They're killers at that point. And flatheads go from being fairly docile. I mean, in that colder water period, 45, 60, 61, 62, and then all of a sudden they become killers at 70, 72, 75 degrees. And they don't want no part of cut bait for a lot of times, unless you got a low, clear water situation. And then all of a sudden they start like gathering up, and then it's all about competition, because they don't want to have to go, 2 miles this way to go chase or up onto the flats. They'd rather feed right where they live. So if you get in that situation and throw cut bait and there's a heavy population, fine. But otherwise, you'll be twiddling your thumbs.
I want to shout out George Ray and Robert Andrews and Circle Hut Productions. I noticed they come in here. Sorry I missed y'all guys. We're kind of in a deep topic right now. And
to keep that static down. There we go.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Another thing the numbers of fish, the competition, it also affects how aggressive they are. If you have fish that have an abundance of food, if they've got more food than they can eat, they'll just linger around and kind of peck at the bait and take what they want. Where when you get fish that are having to fight for that food to survive, them are the ones that just slam the rods and take off. And,
Yep.
you know, it makes a difference. That stuff you got to look for, guys. And, you know, Dan was talking about not having no cover accessible to him where he's at from the bank. But Dan, if the fish are coming out of that cover to feed, you don't necessarily have to have that cover. You just have to know where the fish are going to be.
I'm going to go out
If
and
you
come back
can't-
in again.
Okay. If you can't get to where the fish are, be where you know the fish are going to be.
And I see our good friend Hilljack is in there. Hilljack, praying for you, brother. Hope the men. Hope you keep continuing
Awesome, Hill.
up, feeling better.
Yeah, it's great to see Hilljack in here.
Amen. And you know I think kind of what Epic was saying there. That's why you'll see a lot of people have really good success, especially in boats where they're you're doing the drifting and dragging and things, because that bait is moving. They don't have that time to kind of it's an instinctual thing. Here's that food that's going right by them.
Yeah.
Bam, and they nail it. And I think that's why that works a lot.
That's with the bumping too. That's awesome, Jack. I hope you get to see your daughter and your grandkids.
That would be great.
Bumping does the same thing instead of dragging. That fish is sitting there, and you're putting that bait in front of that fish's mouth. Even on spawn, you hear the bass fishermen and the bluegill and crappie fishermen. Even if them fish are on their spawning bed, and you take that bait and put it in their long enough, a lot of the times you will make them mad enough that they will hit it just to get rid of it. And I think about it, Stan. If you're sitting on the couch, you may not be that hungry. You may not be that hungry. But if someone walks up with a fresh plate of shrimp or something,
Oh yeah.
would you like some? You're right. I want some. Just hand that on over. You know, fish are the same way. If you put it in front of their face, them big boys are going to eat.
Yes, and that's a lot of that goes back to that. Epic has talked a lot before about target strike zone and getting that bait into that strike zone. If you're out of it, they can tell it's there, but if it's not in the strike zone where they're willing to go out to get it, same thing like you were just saying about you're sitting on the couch, you're not really hungry. Well, you may not walk all the way to the kitchen to get that shrimp or that hot dog or bag of chips or whatnot. But your wife is nice enough to bring that bag of chips and beer. Well, you're gonna eat it.
Yeah.
She brought it into your strike zone. If it's out there in the kitchen and you don't, I'm not gonna. But
Well, see, that makes a big difference in fishing too. A lot of the times, fishing the rocks or the stumps or the brush. If I can fish brush piles, I like to fish the brush piles, and you can throw out to that brush and you may be only 2 foot from that brush, but especially with flathead, sometimes you cannot get that flathead to come out of that brush pile to hit that bait, but you can take that rod and work that bait back closer to that brush pile, and all of a sudden you'll get it close enough that fish feels comfortable coming out of that cover, whether it be brush, rocks, or whatever, and he'll smack it. Just because if there's fish there, and fish are feeding, if you're not getting bites, move your bait closer to the structure. Move your bait closer to the brush pile, the rocks. Don't sit there, because a lot of times they'll lay in that brush, and that's their habitat, guys. You got to remember, that's their home. That's where they spend the majority of their life. You've got to do your part to try and lure them out. I mean, It's not like you can send a strippergram down to that fish. So you're going to have to do what you can to try and entice that fish to come out.
And also, I can't wait and hopefully I'll have the time. I can't wait to get on those bites where you need to move your baits 3-4 inches, just hopping it back to you, and all of a sudden it's on again. It can just go dead. You start moving your baits just a little bit here or there, cranking the reels a little bit, dragging them a little bit on the bottom, especially for flatheads, and all of a sudden you're in them again. And they sat out there very close to the flatheads. They just weren't moving. And then all of a sudden you're moving them again, and you might hop close enough to what, like Stan said, the strike zone. And then all of a sudden it's on. And
a lot of times
because it happens a lot, but it doesn't happen really in the pre-spawn too much. It's usually post-spawn. It's usually that summer period, but it does if you're on the shore, because you know you can only hit so many areas from the shore. And then you have to start hopping those things, because if those fish are sitting there, they're sitting there here when they're unwilling to move very far for a bait, but yet you hopped it into its zone, it's on.
Well, and a lot of times,
I watch Fishing Magician, and I watch Stan, and I watch you, and I watch and a lot of times I'm yelling into the screen, drag the baits, move the baits. I'm trying my trying to get my Zen stuff going on.
Mental telepathy.
My telepathy, my force bite. I'm trying, and it's not always going to work, but I do it a lot. And so I know whether it's going to work, because I usually know the areas that I'm at, and I usually know, whether there's going to be a lot of fish there, whether they're unwilling to bite or not, they have to prove it to me. So I'm like, okay, if I'm moving these baits and it's not working, I'm like, oh boy, there's not much I can do, because if I'm hopping them and I'm using that grid pattern, because I use a grid in my head a lot of times, especially when I'm fishing like basin areas. And honestly, a lot of good bank spots are what I would classify as basin areas, because they're not necessarily a hard drop. They're not necessarily anything like real crazy. They're just these nice slower basin areas, because if they weren't basin areas, you guys would have to use such big weights that it just wouldn't hold. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you're casting cross current, and those things may bounce a little bit and then stop. And in a lake, it's just going to stop. In Stan's situation, if you're throwing 6 or 8 ounces and it's not going and then hitting the back of the hole, that's usually slower current than I like to fish. But I have that luxury. So Stan and you have to fish these basin holes that gather lots of fish if you guys are going to have a good time. I have the luxury to just, if I don't like it in 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm out of here.
Well, and you talk about moving the baits. I've learned too, a lot of times when the fish are finicky and playing with the bait, and they'll sit there and they'll just tap at it and tap at it and tap at it. Sometimes you can pick that rod up, and when they tap it, you can move it slightly away from them, bring it back to you. And when you go to pull that away from them, a lot of the times it will trigger that more aggressive bite, and they'll grab it.
Blues usually. Channel cats, it's almost the other way, and flatheads, it's almost the other way. Flatheads and and channel cats. Let me see it. Okay, so it's backwards. So as they tap it, they're tapping that.
They're knocking it towards you,
and you feed it to them, and then do that slow, nice hook set like this, because it gave them a little bit more confidence as they're peeling their tail back, and all they're doing is moving back in the current. And I actually saw it with my own eyes in my big tank, and I was like,
and they feel no resistance.
Yes, exactly. So I didn't even put a hook on it. I just put a line on it, 20-pound test, crocheted through it, threw the shad in there and the moon eye, and they went up and hit it. And they pulled back and they felt a little resistance, and boom, they spit it right away. They may hit it again, blah, blah, blah. But then the ones that didn't have a line on it, they were able to go back in the current, because it was a big round tank with about 3-mile-an-hour current. They'd come up, hit it, pull back, and if they could go back a foot or two with no resistance, it goes in their
They'll go.
They'll go.
It builds their confidence.
Yes, that was like a V8 moment. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
So I started doing it. And this was back in the day when I used to actually fish tournaments. And once I learned that technique in that shallow water stuff, oh my gosh, it was a landslide. Because back
See,
in the
and
day, nobody knew how to do it.
exactly. This is the stuff nobody shares, and guys that are new to fishing or getting into catfishing, they're having to figure out this the hard way, and it takes years of time on the water and fishing and experience to learn some of this stuff. So this has got the kind of stuff I want to get out there because a lot of guys like, man, they won't take the bait; they're just picking at it. They never try and feed that line to
Nope.
that fish or anything.
Nope.
Uh,
Nope.
Fish hunt, trap, repeat.
But you know what? Fishing Musician took to it pretty quick because I was in his live. I'm like, dude, I saw. He's like, well, they won't pull the rods down. I'm like, well, do the shallow hook set. He's like, what's that? You know, and I just made up a term for it. I mean, I've always kind of called it that. But, you know, I was like, okay, just feed it down, feed it down, feed it down, and then a long, slow sweep. And a lot of guys, they've never thought that they could set the hook with a circle hook.
Yes.
But once that secret's out, you'll see a lot of people doing it because they're like, it's going to be obvious that it works because it
If
does.
you don't jerk it,
Right,
if you
right.
jerk it like a J hook, you just
Yep.
put slow, steady pressure on it, and
Yep.
that fish, by the time he feels the pressure on it, that
Yep.
circle hook already got him in the
Yep.
corner. He's
Stan's
done.
starting to do it. Stand 3's starting to do it.
That's how I caught all my fish the other day.
And I'm not saying I'm like the big inventor of anything. It just makes sense. And a lot of times it's difficult when the whole world says, wait till the rods get pulled down. And that is difficult. I'm telling you, it's difficult. I've even started out a couple of my videos like that. I said, look, we can find them. We can put the baits in their face. Now the hard part is whether they'll pull the rods down or not. And sometimes in the winter, it's difficult to do it. Sometimes it is difficult to do that hook set, but when it's on, it makes all the difference in the world.
My last live stream, if I would have not held the rod, and when the fish started going and fed him line, if I would have not have slowly set that hook, I would have never caught one of them fish because as soon as they felt that tension, they would spit that bait.
Yep, especially in basin holes and lakes. Holes and lakes, because it's that added current that actually helps that. Even though I get a lot of that, especially with big channel cats, I get a lot of that. I could be in 5 mile an hour current, 6 mile an hour current, and they still will just tap the crap out of it. And you still have to feed them down. But normally you don't.
Yeah.
But in lakes and rivers, I see it a lot in lives. I see a lot of choop, 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 choop. And you can tell by the wavelength, they're not necessarily small fish. Sometimes they're only 3 to 5 pounds, but sometimes they're 15 to 20. And people will think this is odd, but I've seen enough big fish tap and peck at rods that 50-pounders will tap and peck. And I'm telling you, no one believes me. But at some point in YouTube, people are going to. Because they'll start,
especially the flathead.
Huh? I was just going to say, and that's where it sounds silly. You pay attention enough to the bite, even the little taps, you can tell the difference between a small fish tapping and a big fish tapping. It takes time. You got to but you'll eventually, and a lot of times that'll tell you what you need to do. You know, if you're getting a lot of the, for someone on the bank that's just wanting to catch fish and you're getting a lot of the small fish tapping, chances are you got to downsize. But you get the bigger fish tapping, then it's like what you're saying. It's more of the feeding them the bait and doing other different things.
I can't count the number.
Or, and I see this a lot. I'll be on the big river, and I'll go into an area, and I only mark big fish. And I put the baits down at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it may be August, and I get tapping going on. I get that hard jolt tap, boom, and then it just sort of pulls a little bit and lets go. And then I get another rod doing that, and I'm like, all right, boys, we're off of these fish until it's almost dark, because those big fish do not give up their habitat during the day until it becomes about an hour after dark, and it's game on. I mean, game on. When I see that, and I may pre-fish before I have customers or pre-fish before I go do anything. And
Yeah.
if I see that, I don't want to see this. I want to see boom, and then just that little pull,
Yeah.
and then nothing. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
come back to those fish, and it'll be game on. It'll be 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes
Yeah.
80s and 90s, and sometimes 3 or 4 in a boat at the same time. It's crazy as it sounds. Like that very wing dike that I threw on my wing dike video. Oh my gosh. And that's what I was going to talk about earlier. We talked about spots that are like maybe a wintering hole, and wintering holes a lot of times aren't good in the spring or summer, but there's some of them that are wintering hole. They are spring spots, they're summer spots, they're fall spots, they're hot, they're cold, they're everything in between. And they always hold a few big fish. Now, blues, it's a little bit less predisposed to that because they're such highly migratory fish. But you'll find blues holding in wintering holes sometimes in the summer. There's a kid that fishes the Missouri, and he I have never talked to him, but I've seen his YouTube videos. I know he knows exactly what I'd be talking about because he fishes classic wintering holes all year round and does really well. I forget what he's not in the chats. Well, anyway, I might think about it. But anyways, Country Boy and Stan, I feel comfortable saying this is that I am very, very happy to A, share information, and B, share information with people that are so understanding of it and have figured out so much on their own, and that everybody's learning the correct language to talk about, this catfishing stuff so that everybody we almost need a dictionary. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of caught wildfire on this between what, there's 100 other catfishing YouTubers and blah, 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 but everybody hears one word that describes it best, and then they gravitate towards it, and then everybody knows what's going on. It's awesome. Like, I can't see who all is in chat, but every single one of them has got something impressive to say every single time I go into a chat. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if I don't know what they look like. I don't know what, but they've all got something impressive to say, even if it's a little bit, smarmy. Sometimes they're like, well, they'll say, well, and I keep using Dan's Creations as a example because he's like, well, let me see you do that in lakes. And every time I'm like, none of us are doing that in lakes. We're not going from rivers to, kicking butt because what we know, and then bank fishing a lake we don't know and whooping up on 50-pound blues. You have to have a lot of luck for. But there is one thing to be said for lakes and rivers. If you're going to go to a lake, let's just say I decided to enter a tournament on Country Boy Catfishing's lake. I'm in a serious disadvantage, even though I know catfish, even though I've studied them all my life, even though I put more catfish in the boat than Attila the Hun killed people. I'm still at a disadvantage because lakes are subtle, and you got to have a lot of experience on lakes. I can go to a river and pretty much put myself on the areas that are going to be 30 to 50, sometimes 80 or 100-pound catfish, and I've never ever been there in my life. But lakes is a different story. And bank fishing, you really got to
gather that information on that body of water before you go to it. That's just like me being a lake fisherman, and the only river I've ever fished is Red River down here. It's not the same as the Tennessee or the Mississippi or the Ohio. So for me to not try and gain knowledge of them bodies of water before I would go, I'm seriously crippling myself and crippling my chances at getting on them big fish that you see Roger and Big Mike and all them catch. Just because I don't have the knowledge. It's not the same. Epic Fish Hunt Trapper Pete wants to know what the biggest fish you caught is.
All right. So which continent are we talking about? Are we talking about the United States? Are we talking about South America? I've caught bigger fish in South America, but the biggest fish that I could tell you for certain is on my YouTube channel. It's the Epic Super Monster. Now, I believe I've caught bigger fish than that. They were different proportions, but they're not on video. So that's the biggest one I could claim. And I believe it to be somewhere between 125 and 131 or 132 pounds. And I've given some explanations why I think that. Now, if you go purely on measurements, it's probably going to fall short of that. But that thing had the biggest, most massive head I've ever seen on a live catfish in the United States.
Yeah.
It had a severely shortened tail. I believe instead of just 60 inches, it could have been as much as 63 inches, blah, 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 blah. But I'll still stick with whatever anybody guesses that thing at. I'm not a steadfast weigher anyway. So somewhere I've kind of picked at 130 pounds or so. But I will say this, that is the 9th fish over 100 pounds I've caught or somebody caught in my boat.
Yep. See, mine, when I started YouTube, all my PBs kind of went out the window. Because with YouTube, you know the saying, if you don't have it on video, it didn't happen.
That's right. That's right.
I'm just starting all over again, and I'll work my way up. And
it's more fun that way, though, too.
Yeah. The only thing that hurts me on my PBs is this lake back years ago, it wasn't as heavily fished. And I caught 104-pound blue out of it.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Well, we had several fish at one time over 100 pounds in this lake.
Nice.
And what has killed it is catch everything and keep it and eat it. You got guys that are catching 40, 50, and 60-pound fish consistently on trot lines and jug lines and stuff like that. And they're keeping every single thing they catch. And that's why I reach out to these guys and I want to try and get CPR out there because especially in a lake, it's a resource and you can outfish the resource. If you keep taking all these big fish out of that lake, excuse me, there's going to come a time when we go to that lake and there's no more big fish to catch. And once you devastate a fish population in a lake like that, it takes years and years to ever gain that back. And if you don't have the right genetics in that water from those big fish, you're never going to get it back.
But
that could be a resource you lose forever. And people don't understand this. You know, take a picture. There's guys that make replicas. You do not have to kill that fish to get a mount made. You can take the measurements, the girth, the length, and they will make you replicas, and that fish can live and that fish can breed so that other people get to feel that same excitement as you did when you reeled that fish in.
Except for Country Boy, they do not make a replica that matches mine.
No. They only go so big. And like when I caught that fish, you know, I was shocked. And I didn't even have a dip net. And my uncle and them were with me. And we were in this little Lone Star V-bottom boat when I hooked this fish. A little 14-foot V-bottom.
Wow.
Had a little 9.9 Sea King on it. When I finally got this fish to the top of the water, my uncle, you know, being an older guy, he kind of looked at me funny, and he's like, well, now what are you going to do with it? And I had him hold the rod, and I stripped down and jumped in the water and wrestled this fish and threw that fish over the side of the boat.
Now, that would have made a great
because
YouTube
I did not have a net.
That would have made a great YouTube video.
Yeah, because, you know, you don't expect to catch a fish like that. And then, you know, here we are in this little V-bottom. And, you know, my uncle being the smart aleck he is, he's like, well, you didn't bring the net, so now what? So there's no way you could have picked him up by the line and got him in the boat.
No.
So I just stripped down, jumped overboard, and I wrestled this big old fish and got him up on my shoulder and had the boat in one hand. I'm trying to flop him over in the boat, and my uncle's in the boat, and we get him in there, and we get him weighed, and we let that fish go in the exact same place we caught him at in that same
Nice.
area. We did not travel across the lake and turn him loose. I put him back in his same home, his same habitat.
Nice.
And I don't
Now-
know. The best of my knowledge, nobody else has caught this fish, but I don't know what comes off the truck lines and jug lines, but there are big ones in there.
David, I'm going to make this prediction right now in front of everybody. Stan will catch an 85 before fall hits. Stan or his son is going to hit an 85. At
Boy, that
least an
James
80,
Rizzer-
but I would have to say an 85 because
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. Their learning curve is so huge on that thing right now. And they're getting out in the boat and they're learning the baits and they're learning the habitats and they're putting the time in. It's just a matter of time before these guys score an 85. It could have happened tomorrow. But I knew that, 3 months ago, 4 months ago when Stan and I first started talking and he started asking questions about, and he knew what was important. Not just asking questions.
Yeah.
He already was a good fisherman. I'm just
Yeah.
saying he keyed on the right things. And he said, Tim, he says, well, okay, so how is this equation work again? I said, yeah. And then, by the time I said it again, Stan was like, that's what it is. And so when he went out there, he looked at the correlation and he said, current first, depth second, cover third, when you're talking blues. And then then it's all the idiosyncrasies. And, every time I listen to your lives, I get that idea of super experience as far as paying attention to what's went on, what can happen, what's gonna happen, and then try to do all that stuff. And you guys both speak and explain things very well. P City did great the other night.
Yes.
I mean, I'm pinching myself because 30 years ago, there was nobody that could come on a live show on YouTube and explain themselves and explain.
No.
They're like, catfish are great to eat. I mean, that's all you heard. I mean, there was a few people out there that could, but not many.
Well, see, and I'm a lot different from a lot of guys. They won't show people their spots they fish, their exact locations. And I'm the opposite. I will show you exactly where I'm fishing, what I'm fishing with, and why I'm fishing there. I tell you why I'm there. Why are the fish here at this time of year? Why this spot? Because that's the biggest deal with bank fishing too. You can't just go and drive up somewhere and say, hey, this looks like a good spot. I'm going to sit here. You have to know where the fish are at, why they're going to be there. Are they feeding? Are they moving from one pattern to another? Are they going to their wintering holes? Why are they there? You have to understand this knowledge.
and
a lot of people don't.
It depends. Again, you hear me, the targeting. It depends on what you're doing. If your idea and your excitement of fishing is you get away from work and you're out on the bank, and if you catch some fish, you do, and if you don't catch them, you don't.
Yep.
You don't. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, enjoy fishing. Come on and talk with us, and that's awesome. And if the big fish in your spot is that 10, 12 pound fish or that 15 pound fish, and you're catching 4-pounders and you want to move up to that 12-pounder and you can hear little things that help you out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I know that I'm lucky that I'm here. Dan put something out there that, just because you have fish in your river, he put a comment out there about he doesn't have access to the rivers where it has flows of constant moving. Just because there is fish there, you still got to know where to go catch them.
Yeah.
How to catch them.
And if you're from the shore, if you're off the shore, you got to have vantage point to actually contact those fish.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that you guys haven't seen me do it yet, but I do the super wind up cast where, I'm casting 70, 80, 100 yards, something crazy like that, because I needed to learn that. I needed to get the the right equipment. I needed to do that Babe Ruth baseball send it
Yep.
routine to get to some of my fish. Now I don't have to do it on the Mississippi because I can generally, do that. But I was fishing places on the Kaskaskia where it's 60 yards to my big catfish target.
Yep.
And, they got you blocked off. They got you whatever. If you're on the shore, you got to get out past that shallow into the deep certain times of year. Sometimes they'll come up, like on the Potomac. I see a lot of those fish caught in 3 foot of water, but they're still singing out there. But if they could just get over that channel at some point, that super channel, just like Catfish Dave, when he was fishing off the shore. I mean, he's winding up with surf gear to get to that channel because a lot of times that's that defining point where those huge fish won't climb up and get on those shallows a lot of the times a year. Sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll be in 2-3 foot of water. And we see that. We see anglers right now doing that. But in a month from now,
when it gets
not
hot.
so much. That's right. When it gets warm.
See, when it gets hot in the summertime, you'll see me on my lives and everyone thinks I'm crazy because I wade out in the water with these cottonmouths and stuff, and I may be waist deep in water before I ever throw my rods out. And I may wade out there, and I'm going to throw that rod as far as I can, 120 yards, and then I'm going to walk back to the bank with every rod, and people are like, why are you doing that? I'm fishing. And they're like, man, I'm not doing that. And they'll be sitting right next to me, and I'm catching fish, and they're not. And they're like, why are we not catching fish? I said, because you're not hitting the same depth of water that I am.
Right.
You can fish 4 foot of water all day long. If them fish are in 12 foot of water, they're not coming from 12 foot to 4 foot just to get your bait. I don't care how good it smells. Sometimes you have to take that bait to the fish, not
David,
wait for the fish to come to you.
You know what a cottonmouth is that lands in my boat?
Bait.
Dead.
Yeah, you're darn right. It's bait.
Yeah.
It lands in my boat, it's bait. It's not that I'm going to kill it. It's just I want to use a cottonmouth for bait. Because I've used bull snakes, and I've used garter snakes, and I've used common water snakes, but I've never used a cottonmouth, and I want to. Maybe that mouth will attract them a little bit better, them fangs and stuff.
Well, and I have a young guy that I take hunting and stuff with me, and I take him fishing. And I say young, he's in his 20s, but that's young to me.
Yeah, it is me now.
And I almost had him convinced into wading out there and throwing his rod out. And I get about 2 foot from the shore, and this cottonmouth goes around my leg. And he's like, is that a snake? And I was like, yes, it is. He's like, I'm out. I'm done. That was it.
The first video that I put on YouTube, it's just it was a bunch of pictures together. But one of the pictures in there, you see me in the James River up to here doing the same thing that you're talking about, going out to the chest, and I'm walking the pole back in.
Yeah. Well, see this lake that I fished that I like a lot, Eureka Lake, it's full of cottonmouths. And when that lake was built, it was not supposed to fill up for a couple of years. And we had lots of rains come. So it filled up and flooded instantly. You would be going in your boat when that lake first filled up. And if you got near trees, the snakes would be falling out of the trees in the boat with you. And it was quite the spectacle. You would see people, and people would dive out of their boat. And it's like, well, if that snake is in here and he's in your boat, how many of them do you think's in the water that you just dove off into? You're trying to escape the snake by jumping in with more snakes. And it was quite a spectacle to watch. You'd see a lot of guys, they would abandon ship.
So, guys, I got a quick story to tell you. When I was in my first year of college, I went to community college, which is about 40 miles away from my house. So I had morning classes and I had evening classes, but I had about a 4-hour lag in the middle of the afternoon. And there was a place called the Peoria Narrows, which I learned from other people, but they had boats. So I drove my little junk Chevy Chevette with all my rods in the back, and I had chubs and blah, blah, blah. And, I don't know. I was like 19 years old, 18 years old. And I'd drive down the long lane and I'd get there and I started, I set up off the bank and I threw out and it was only 2 foot deep. So I said, oh, geez, this isn't going to get it because I'd already been through that. So I walk out into the water and it's a big river and you can see where the buoys are. They're 100 yards away. 100 yards on one side because the channel was on the other side. I didn't know how deep it was going to get before the buoys, but I just kept going and kept going and I got almost to the buoys and it was only 3 foot deep, but close to the buoys, it shotgunned down at about 16, 17 feet. So I stood there and that day I caught 15 big channel cats in a row throwing off that channel edge. So the next day I brought a lawn chair. And I brought this lawn chair and my other stuff, and I set this lawn chair, and I'm sitting to my chest like this, holding a rod like this and a rod like this. And so I fished that next day, and the worst thing was when the boats went by, it sent a wake almost over my head. So I had to stand up when the wakes were up and go down. And you ought to see the people that looked at me like, oh my gosh, is that really a person just sitting in the water right there? Yep, it was. I'm like, yeah, I talk to people. They're like,
drive by and see Tim out there in his chair with the snorkel tube on, holding the rod.
But pretty much. I mean, there was barges at one. You had to back up when the barges came because they'd suck you right off that. I had to pick up my chair when barges came by and like back up like about 60 paces and just hold on because those big barges on those small rivers, it was a big river, but the channel's narrow, but the shallows are expansive shallows. So it would suck about half of that water off of those because it's pushing it to one end. And like guys that have seen barges on the James and they see them on the Mississippi and the Tennessee, they have never seen that. It will literally suck the water right off the shore. So if you're in 2 foot of water and a barge goes through on those narrow channels, your boat will actually be on land until the barge goes by and it raises back up. It's pretty crazy stuff.
I don't remember the exact river.
A real barge bite.
I don't remember the exact river, but the one that Paula Smith fishes. She fishes a little narrow river that them barges come down, and she has to watch that.
Yep, you do. And I'm always prepared, even when I'm anchored. I'm always prepared to start that motor, and I don't care where those rods are at because if I'm that close to the barges, they could literally swing you out and get you caught in that. So and it depends how much power they're putting through. If they're throwing 6 foot wakes off the back, you got to watch out. But at night you don't know. So I'm always prepared to start the motor, and who cares what the rods are doing? Now I'm just prepared to not get sucked into a barge because I fish. Gosh, this is weird. Like I'll fish 10 feet from the barge lane sometimes, like 10 feet. But that's usually on the slow down points. I don't like go down river and go 10 feet. I'll fish 10 feet on the slow down points, like the pinch points where they have to pass each other or like right before they go into blocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I never got to fish the rivers with the barges, but one time I went to Alabama for a family funeral and went out with them on Lake Wheeler, and they fished right by the Wheeler Dam. Yep. And you had to keep your boat motor running and idling. And I'm like, why? Yep. He's like, when they sound that siren, you have to get out of here because it will pull your boat underwater when they kick them turbines and stuff in. And we were fishing that turbulent water right where the rough water hit the smooth. And man, just tearing the fish up. But it's no joke. When they hit that siren, you better get out of the way and get some gone. Then they'll sound it again and give the all clear.
That is true. That is one thing that's a little bit more forgiving. The TVA system has a warning system, and they fluctuate it heavily. The Mississippi is a slower trickle. It may rise in 3 feet in an hour, but they're not going to just dump it on you. That TVA is no joke. They will pump that out of there because I believe isn't it mostly a lot of power plant situations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, the Mississippi doesn't have that, but the floodwater situation is you might wake up the next day and it's 5 feet higher.
Yeah.
5 feet consistently and garbage coming down, and you go, what? They wouldn't expect it to happen. Well, they didn't care. So your 3-day trip might be a day and a half.
Yeah, that's what we run into here because our lake is controlled by the Corps of Engineers.
Yep.
We were dry, and then it rained for a month, and the lake finally got up, and it finally come over the banks and started getting up into the shallow grass. And next thing you know, they opened every floodgate wide open, and you went out there the next day, and they had already dropped that lake down below its normal banks. And it's like, why? You're killing me, guys. And especially on our body of water, when they're letting water out of that dam like that, it kills the bite. It just shuts them down. I don't know what it is about that water going out, but in the lake, it kills it. But you can go to the spillway behind it that runs in down the Red River, and you can catch the fish coming up it. But you got like a
Dave,
1 day window.
A general rule of catfish is stable water is the best. Rising water is just a little bit, it's less, but it's still okay. But dropping water is the kiss of death. So if you get heavily dropping water, like I was talking about earlier, 2 foot is 1/4 of 1 atmosphere. Okay, so that pressure on that swim bladder, when they drop that, it creates a flight mode, a survival mode. They're no longer interested in eating. If something drops 2 foot and all of a sudden they can't, they'll filter down to deep water, but they're not interested in eating that much. If it comes up, steadily, gradually, blah, 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 fine. But once it starts going down, that triggers their instinct to move to deeper water. They're not interested in eating. They're interested in surviving. Because if they got caught shallow, back in the day when all of our rivers have these expansive backwaters, they used to go up into those backwaters. And then once that water starts going down, they find that main river again because they could be trapped in there and die. So it just is one of those things. And anytime you look at a graph, especially a hydroelectric graph, it's going like really hard ups and downs on that graph. Well, you'll see the correlation between like maybe 9 o'clock and 11. It dropped drastically. Bite was terrible. 11 to 12, it came back up and leveled off. Bite was pretty decent. And we don't really have that on the Mississippi or the James as much, except for I could about guess if Stan took a ledger and wrote when he had the bites according to the waning or the the rising or the falling water, I'll guarantee you he's got twice as many bites on the rising water than he does the falling water.
You will hear me say every week, I prefer the incoming tide.
That's right. Rising water.
I gotta come to
multiple reasons.
The James River.
The bait is moving in. The smaller particles, it's incoming. Well, that means there's more of that incoming too. So it affects everything. And incoming is always by far more productive than.
Did I just hear David say he wants to fish the James River?
Yes, I got to go to the James River. When you did their live last week with Dan Green Machine, and I've seen that bridge. I still cannot get that. I still cannot get that bridge out of my mind. I go to sleep at night, and
bridges like that.
Yeah, that bridge is in my dreams. It's haunting me. I can still hear that flathead talking to me.
Let's see. Hold on. I got a 2 hours and 3 minutes in. I had a bet with Dan from Green Machine to see how long it was going to take before that bridge came up in the. I'll just clear it up. We had been out fishing. We were supposed to leave by 11, and by then I think it was 1 o'clock or so. Getting up into there when we had made it to that bridge area, and there was some other boats in the area, and there were some other things, and we were starting to do it, and then we're like, you know what, if we start getting up to this bridge and tie up this bridge, we're gonna be we might not be going out fishing for a while again. You know what I mean? It was one of those situations where we knew we had to go. So that's why the bridge was put on hold for another day. But yes, the feeling.
You hit that bridge right, you'll do an entire show on just that bridge.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's why we didn't want to start it right there.
But I'm telling you, there's people that fish bridges, and then there's people that kind of fish at bridges. You
Yeah.
can't just fish at a bridge. This is a down and dirty thing. This is the thing where you might need to get creative and you might need to tie and don't care about the creosote that lands on your boat. I've got tar on the gunnel of my boat from a few bridges that I fished. And you're going to get beat up a little bit. You're going to slam. You're going to have to hold on. But I'm going to do either a live or a video on railroad bridges this summer if I can. And you guys are going to see what combat fishing.
I still remember every detail about that bridge. It was not just the old wood bridge that got me so excited. It had the overhanging trees that come out of the bank and hung over the water. And it shaded that.
Got the X's that go down into the water.
Yeah.
It's got the big
It shaded that corner. It shaded that corner, and I could see that big fat flathead laying in that shade, getting out of that sun.
Yep.
Man, I just know he was there. As I seen that, I was like, "Oh no!" I mean, I will see that. That will haunt me till I get to fish it now.
That's
awesome.
too funny.
That's awesome. Every time I go over a bridge and I look into the water and see the current, I see the way it's moving, I'm like, channel cats, or the next bridge I got, flatheads are right there. They're right there. I can see that water moving. I can see it going around the corner. I can see it going over that wing dike or whatever. I can see the hole, because when you get that vantage point, that high vantage point, you can see the way that current is moving in and around that cover and that whole bottom topography. Of course, it drives my wife and kids nuts.
Yeah, mine too. I got so mad that one of the creeks that feed our lake, there's lots of little bridges that go across it. And this one bridge was right before it made a big outside bend. And it always collected the logs there at that bridge. And it had a massive log jam there for years. Well, every time the creeks got up, guess where the fish went? To that big log jam. And to protect their bridge is what the state said. They went down dynamite and blew my brush pile, my log jam, out from away from that bridge and blowed it on down the creek. And man,
every flathead under it.
Yep. I'd have liked to stuck that dynamite somewhere and blow them down that creek.
So Stan, I have a question. Was that the bridge that your son caught the 55 on? Or is that the other bridge?
No, that was the other one.
The other one. Okay, I'm familiar with the other one too, but I'm not going to say anything because I want you to expose these bridges.
Yes, and
I want to give it.
You could actually. I don't know if y'all heard it. We had mute the mic when we were by that bridge, and that was because we were set up for dragging and drifting and stuff, and like I said, we were already later than what we were supposed to be. So it's like, all right, do we change everything over and fish this? No, being Mother's Day.
I know they got the name up.
Stan, promise me this. You have to fish that before June. Now, June, on the East Coast, June to July, probably July 4th or middle, is going to be your spawn period.
Night City.
You guys are about a month ahead of us. So you got to fish it from now till June. And you're going to want to take a look real close with your fish finder. You're not always going to mark fish, especially flatheads. You may mark blues, but they're going to be in that center channel between the two open ones. Okay, on the big pylons that stick down. There may be some, like we fished the front of the one on the right side, and we hit a 70 on like a Tuesday in like 2006 or something like that, and then we hit another 70 another night on the other one. So there were back-to-back 70s that long ago. So just hit it consistently. Don't spend too much time on it. But if you want flatheads, get in there on that second one, like that second one in. Read your current, like I know you're good at, You know all that stuff. I'm just kind of
Mhm.
talking out loud. But
Yeah, it helps. It helps everybody out there. Yeah.
well, and
Yep.
and and I'm saying it because I'm selfish, because I want to see that, because that's going to bring back memories that I'll just be like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Stan did it. Blah blah blah. You know, I mean, Stan did it on the bridge, because I don't have an opportunity to go out there very much.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
I
was
want
lucky though. I had a good friend that was a pioneer. I mean, an early pioneer. He was back in the Jimmy Weir days. He fished with Jimmy Weir. He fished with Eberwine.
Yeah.
He fished with all those guys back when the state record was only 32 pounds.
I seen Lynn made it in. Catfish
How's
Fever
it
and
going,
Outdoor.
Lynn?
Banana Bowie. Will Green. Who's Duncan? Whisker and Stripes. Guys, I'm
Whisker.
sorry. If I missed anybody, we kind of got caught up in chat. Tends to happen sometimes. Will Green's in here. He mile and a half from a railroad bridge that crosses Texoma. I love them railroad bridges. Even your old bridges that used to be the one lane roads that went across the creeks or the rivers and stuff that collapsed. The older the structure is, the bridge and stuff, the better I like it.
And the better looking it is, I like it better.
Yeah.
And you know what? If it's
We were-
got stuff growing on it, even better. If that log jam has
Yeah.
been there so long, it's got grass and everything growing on it,
Yep.
that gives me a chubby.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
it does.
Yep. You see
Like I
certain
said-
stuff is that you learn that stuff as a fisherman. You can be going down a river and you may have several different pieces of timber along that shoreline. But when you fish long enough, you're going to be able to look and decide which log jam is going to be your best chance and hold more fish. You will start to pick that out.
Yes. And on a river, I'll kind of second that, because you'll see on a river, when you're going down a river and you see a succession of log jams and log piles and log whatever. If it's got leaves on it, I tend to leave it alone. It's new. If it's
Yep.
old and it's got, and let's just say there's 4. The front one, if it doesn't have enough, if it's got too much current for flatheads and not enough substance to block enough current, I'm going to skip that first one. But if it's got enough depth, it's got some flotsam in front of it. If it's got weeds growing on top of it, you can see where a beaver chewed,
Yeah.
16 years ago, and it's got this and that. I'm
All the bark's
attracted,
gone.
but yep, and I'm going to choose the first one most of the time, because that's the most active position. I'm going to choose it to just fish the first one, but I'm going to hit that one first. I'm going to hit it for 15, 20 minutes, because that's where the big mob of Jamba might be sitting. I've got my rods out. I put my rods out. I only got my third one in, and then the first one I put out goes down. That's what I like. But that's
Well, if
not
he gets
a general rule. I look at the first one first. If it's too new and too shallow and too fast, I'll skip to the second one. But if the current's high, the last one, the number 4, and it's old and it's got some stuff growing on it and whatever, it's got a nice current break in the back, I'm going to slip in there and I'm going to fish that last one if the current's high. If it's low and there's no current back there, I'm going to go to the first one. So it's not always the same one, but it's one of them in succession that's got the right combination, the right Rubik's Cube, in other words.
Yep. Will Green, if you're not fishing them sunken log jams, you're missing out. You need to be.
Yes.
And I prefer, Tim, I don't know about you, but I prefer wood in the water more than I do rocks, because it seems like your flathead and stuff, they prefer the wood more in my body.
Why? In my experience, having them in tanks, putting artificial reefs, doing things, looking at them in underwater cameras, having them in aquariums, they love overhead cover. Barges act like overhead cover. I fish the front sides of barges. Not only does the current which is slower, kind of increase underneath the barge because the barge is actually sitting in the water. So you got this thing. Maybe it's sitting along the bank. Maybe there's a log jammed up in between it and the bank. And maybe I'll slide the boat. Maybe there's only 10 feet, and I'll back my boat up 100 yards just to get to that log jam that's in between the bank and the barge, and you got the overhead cover, and you got current coming into it and swooping down and going down like this. It's fantastic. It's like some of the best 5-minute bites on big fish I've ever had.
Well, a lot of guys overlook bridges and docks and stuff on that river because they think that's a bass habitat. Well, guess what them catfish are eating is them bass. And a lot of them old fishing docks and stuff like that have been left out there and people don't use anymore, them catfish will move up under them. And if there's current and stuff there, they will make that their new home. And they will sit there and wait for that bait to come to them.
And even in lakes, because it's shade. And I got a buddy of mine, he's been a long time friend of mine. And he's about 6'6", 300. And he gets hot. He starts dipping his hat in the water, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon in August, he's like, "Think that shade bite's going?" I said, "John, the shade bite's always going." And so we move into the the wood and the trees because I've got a diverse situation. I could sit in the sun all day, but man, he gets hot. I'm like, okay, let's go for the shade bite, and he's almost never wrong because by the time that sun gets hot in August. And you hit that shade, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing. Whether if you're in a lake, there's no current because there's no current anywhere. Then you start keeping on depth, cover, structure, overhead cover, shade.
Yep. I keep a bucket with me to where when I get hot, I take that bucket in that lake and I'll take that lake water and I'll just dump it over me.
Like what I told Tim, we lived in upstate New York, and I lived on a lake up there, and there was the Delaware River there also. So when I was younger, what I used to do, I would snorkel down the river, the Delaware and the Neversink River, just to and we didn't have a lot of big catfish up there, so I really was bass, pike, trout, everything. My wife caught the New York State record crappie. We've caught bass out of the lake that were, well, it got away. We never, that's a whole nother, I was on the couch for a few weeks with that one. That's a whole nother story. But point I'm trying to make is we're relating to catfish, but for those people that do fish those I told Tim, well, I was just a multi-species. He's like, why are you saying just? That's just important. And and the more that I'm getting into this trophy catfish or these monster catfish, you really start to see the correlation between the other fish and catfish. So they all have that same kind of mentality when you're targeting the biggest fish of that particular species. And you can relate a lot of those same things. And like I said, I would snorkel down the river. And I'd have a little pole with me. Well, it's hard with the camera, but I have a little, those little 3-foot ice poles with just a little reel, and I'd snorkel just to see how fish would react to what I'm putting down there in front of them or by them, or how far away I could drift it down to get them, and be snorkeling, floating down the river. So that was, if you have the chance.
I knew I liked Stan for a reason, because you have to be a fish psycho like the rest of us to do that kind of stuff. You don't hear, if you're talking to somebody at the water cooler at work, you just don't hear those stories. They go, "Yeah, I like a little bit of fishing." It's like, well, I'm, and all of us catfish guys have seen it. It's the guys that they get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, they put their boat in, they do a little cast until 11 on Sunday, and then it's wash the hands, wash the boat, and then go home. Right?
Yeah.
That ain't fishing to me.
No.
I'm there at 5 in the morning, and I'm there at 1:30 in the morning when those other guys have been to bed by 6 hours, and they're all clean. And I've seen guys come fishing, for bass or whatever in their church clothes, and they're out of there by 9:30. It's whatever. But to each his own. But that's the kind of guys that we are, and probably everybody else in chat. You know, we're the guys that, you know, we have the drive. We've got that vision. We got the dream. I love Catfishing Dreams, you know, name, because that's kind of what we all are. We're all catfishing dreams. I mean, I've been dreaming about doing this, and you know, I caught 130 last year. I seriously want to catch 150 this year. I'd love to, and I think it's possible. Creel might beat me to it.
There's some big fish, even like Stan, where Stan's at, and the James. I think the James is on its way. That river has not reached its potential yet.
No.
And that James River, with the food supply and stuff in that river, it has the potential to grow monster catfish.
It's only
100+ pound fish.
When you look at the fish that come out of the James, when we show them, but we got to get a little better at that, because Tim, I've talked to you a little bit about trying to show the picture how to not to fake the fish, but to not undersize it.
That's right.
I tend to, you know, especially me being you know, 6'3", 400 plus, I hold a 30-pound fish, and I'm doing it injustice because it looks about 15 pounds.
Yeah,
and then I hold it right.
I've got some giant friends too. They're 6'7". They don't fit in pickup trucks worth of crap. I tell them it's a bird. I said, you make fish look small. You can't fit in a pickup truck, and you got to duck under doorways. I said, there's no good thing. And I've got some friends that they have to go sideways through hotel doorways, the narrow ones, like the 28-inch doors. It's just terrible.
Oh, wow.
So I have taught them how to hold fish, and you know who set the precedence for that? In Fisherman did. And actually, the guy that taught me how to do that was the photographer for North American Fisherman and In Fisherman. It was Al Linder's. I think it was his cousin or his uncle. And I forget, I've only met him a couple times. He's like, no, this is what you got to do. You got to make sure you don't do this, you don't do that, and you make sure to tilt the, you know, get the tilt right. It's kind of a pain in the complete ass when you first learn it, but once I've taught my friends and stuff, it's second nature. Sean's still learning it though. He's got some weird hold. I don't know what he's doing. He holds them upside down, pats their belly, and whatever, you know.
Yeah, I need to learn that, because I'm still kind of like caveman, and I got big hands and stuff, and I'll just grab that fish by the lip and pull it up, and you know, it's like, you know, and that's like me. I got big hands and stuff, and my fingers are like sausages. I wear an 11 pinky, and so my hands and stuff make them look small, and people don't believe the size of the fish until you have to show them the scale. You know.
So David, what they taught me is do a hold where you don't show your hands at all. I said, what? He said, do a hold where you don't show your hands. I said, okay. That's it. Learn that secret, and there you go.
Well, yeah, because one hand's always in the fish's mouth, and the other one's under his belly. So.
There you go. And it's all about a fine balance. Now the bad part is try and hold. See, a lot of people are like, well, you're holding it out. I'm like, no, I'm not. Because I mean, there's no way to hold a 90-pound fish out.
No.
Maybe
you have to be
do it for any amount of time. I don't know, but
you're a big man.
Man can do it. But maybe when I was 25 I could, but I couldn't hold it. So my oldest son says, off camera, he says, so what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to hold that fish, but I'm not standing with it, because if it freaks out, it'll slam the bottom of the boat. I said, I'm going to sit here. So you'll see in that one, they're taking rodders off the boat.
Yeah.
And I sit down, and then we both get it on, because it slapped its own face. I'm like, oh, good thing I didn't hold it sideways. Yeah. It would have slapped me in the face.
That's where my belly. This past Sunday on stand day, when he caught that 63. Now, normally when two people stand by the fish to hold it, it makes that fish look huge, right? Well, y'all saw it out there that watched it.
Yeah.
Stand 3 had that 63 pounder, and it looks huge. I stood
Yeah.
next to him to do the one thing, and the tail's out here. It dropped 10 pounds. I'm at it just by me being in the picture with him.
You know, though, Stan, everybody knows. I mean, yes, everybody knows. Big guys make big fish look small.
Yeah. My
But, hey,
belly helps now, though. I'll use my belly and help the fish rest on the belly. You know,
Oh, that's
it's like a
good.
built-in dinner tray down there now.
That's right.
But that 63, that's going to be to do that with my son, and I caught that 25 or whatever it was right before it, and then he gets that one, and that's just that was that could have been a 150-pound fish, and
Yep.
I couldn't have felt any more proud. So it was awesome.
I'm not even related to you, and I was proud.
Yes, you're my brother, Tim.
That's right.
To me, success is not really based on the size of the fish. It's based on figuring the fish out. Because
Consistency.
you're battling wits with these fish.
Mhm.
You're solving a problem, a puzzle that most people are not figuring out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go to the lake, they go to one spot, and they're like, man, the fish are not biting, and they leave. They don't try different spots. They don't try different baits.
4D chess. It's not 3D chess. It's 4D.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a chess match. And to me, that's
with
comes in.
it's 4D with the little 2 on the side, little because that's the luck portion. So you got to have a little bit of luck, but you also got to start out in the right location. You got to understand the fish. You got to have the right bait. You got to have the right equipment, and you got to put the time in. So I guess it's 5D chess, but really on that Rubik's Cube of things, it always changes a little bit. So you've got this revolving equation that goes like this, and you know what? It's not that important for some people. Some people are like, I'm out fishing. I'd rather be lucky than good. Well, I'd rather be good than lucky, because that's my mindset. I'd rather be good than lucky, and I've worked my whole life to become better every time. And I'll be the first to admit I've done some of the dumbest things in the world. I mean, the dumbest. If I was to watch my 20-year-old self fish, I'd be like, listen, son, I'm going to tell you something. You're a dumbass.
My deal is I take my wife fishing with me a lot.
Yeah.
If you pick your wife up at 4:00 in the morning to go fishing, she better catch some fish. Because if you take her there and she's not catching fish, it's not a happy trip home. I promise you.
No. They will let you know it.
Oh, yeah.
They will definitely let you know it.
It's Aaron. Aaron, are you still in here? Catfish Regulators? He's having a good bank tournament, country boy.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bank tournament. It's a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's going to be, kind of like what the chat has done with the multiple people fishing.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Okay.
Did you say it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.?
7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's going to be 7 p.m. on Friday.
Overnight.
Huh?
Virginia. Here in Virginia.
Pre-spawn, he's going to have a night tournament?
Yep.
No.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Maybe that's the only time they have, but there's a lot of tournaments that are here that are like totally the worst time in the world to hold a tournament.
He's still trying to work all the details out and get it scheduled exactly when.
Sometimes you just got to go when you got to go.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you got a choice, I look at tournaments and go, oh, really? So we got a May 1 tournament that's like midnight to 7 a.m. I'm like, that's terrible. No bites.
Yeah.
Now,
if it was summertime, that would be a good window.
Yes, it would be a good window. It would.
August, when it's 120 degrees during the day, that's when you'll see fishing. I'll be out there night fishing because
start about 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, 115 degrees. My bacon will be sizzling out there. I can't do it.
Oh, you know what? We sizzle our bacon all the time. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Because we're just that bunch of psychos. We'll get out of the hotel, and we know the bite's not going to start till 9. We're out there at 4 because we're there, and we'll just be burning, and but we've caught a fish or two between 5 and 7 before, so we just gotta go get your bait. You gotta prepare.
Do you know why, Tim?
Huh?
Do you know why y'all do that? Because you're a fishing addict. It happens
Yeah,
to all.
that's right. You're a fishing
The whole time you're sitting there and you're like, well, they're probably not going to bite till 9. It's only 4. And then your mind starts working. You're like, yeah, but what if this is going on?
That's right.
Happens.
That's exactly
And you
right.
talk yourself into it to where you have to be there just so you know you didn't miss anything.
Oh yeah. So on Epic Catfish Weekend Adventure or whatever the hell I called it, the night bite was terrible. Believe that or not, it was absolutely terrible the night before. We went and caught a bunch of bait. We went back. We did this. We did that. We fished the, traditional 80-foot spot. 80-pound fish hole. We fished another spot. We fished below the dam. We fished way downriver, and it was absolute crap. And I thought to myself, there's no way that the day bite is going to be as good, which I knew it wasn't because it was already waning.
Yeah.
But yet we were still, I woke up, filmed myself, and I said, yeah, we're in no hurry to get back to the river. We showered and got right back to the river. Dumb,
Yeah.
but we did it anyway because we're like,
Yeah.
I was just trying to talk myself out of it. I'm like, there's no way that I'm going back to the river right now. But 20 minutes later, it seemed like a great idea.
Yeah.
Because I started saying, maybe that bite's doing a little bit of a shift. Maybe we didn't go here. Maybe we didn't go there. So we got to do it.
My wife gets mad at me because she likes to night. And she's like, well, why aren't we night fishing? I said, because the night bite's not there right now. They bite early morning and late afternoon. And when the sun goes down, they're not biting no more. They just shut down. She's like, well, how do you know that? Because I've been fishing. And she'll go with me and we'll sit there. And at dark, I just reel my rods and stuff in. And she's sitting there with hers. And she's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm sitting here till you get tired of fishing. And I'll let her fish because she's the type of person she's got to prove it to herself. And then she'll get mad. She's like, well, if you knew the fish weren't going to bite, why didn't you say something?
I did.
Yeah. But I'm smart enough not to argue. I'll let you hash this out. And, she's like, well, I've caught catfish at night before. I said, yes. During the dog days of summer, when it's really, really hot during the day, them fish are in deep holes. When them fish hit the deep water, you got to wait till it's nighttime to bank fish if all you got is shallow water. And when I say shallow water, I'm talking 4 foot or less. It's going to have to be evening time for them fish to bite. And they will usually bite maybe up till 10 o'clock the next morning. But after 10 o'clock, man, you might as well reel it up and go to the house because that water has already warmed up. They've already pulled out. The bait fish have left, and the bait fish are no longer shallow. So the fish left. And
okay, so I've got this new.
You got to watch and pay attention to.
It's not new to me. I'm trying to get people into YouTube to understand this one. And over 30 years of catfishing and going on adventure trips and doing my local river day after day after day, and then going to the Mississippi day after day after day, I've noticed a couple things. And one of them is that with blues especially, they seem to have a 3 to 4 day bite cycle. That doesn't mean that they're biting just for 3 or 4 days and then they're off for 3 or 4 days. What I'm saying is when you fish day after day after day after day, if you go from the bite terrible, like you get no bites, the next day you'll see the activity go up a little bit, and then by the second day it'll go up a little bit more, and the third day seems to be the pinnacle. Geez, I gotta back up. the pinnacle of the bite window, where that's the hot day. And then all of a sudden it'll dwindle one more day. So the first day was kind of half-assed. The second day was a lot better. The third day was on fire. The fourth day is down from the third day, but the day after that, it can be non-existent or it can be just worse. And then you're down to nothing. I mean, it could be 2-3 days and the bite is so terrible. You just want to whatever. So you go from having to, stand behind a tree to bait your hook, otherwise you're molested, to not very good to terrible where you can't even buy a bite. And that doesn't matter if you're fishing the same spot day after day after day. But it seems that I saw that again on the Has Life deal tournament. Whatever the Has Life, his brother, there was a bunch of other people. I saw the bite pick up a little bit, and then Has Life was a little bit more, and then Fishing Magician was on the super bite day, and then DMV was on the downslope to the nothing. And I'm like, there it is. And it played itself on the Potomac even. It played itself on the James with me, the Mississippi, the Spoon, the Skunk, the Wapsie, every river that I've ever fished for a 6, 7, 8 day period has always been like that. Did you guys notice that?
What helps me on the river, though, Tim, compared to in the lake, is like this one lake that I fish, it covers 3 different counties. And the weather in one county can be completely different from the county next to it. And it can be raining in one and sun shining in the other. So a lot of the times I can move just a couple of miles. I can be sitting at one spot and have caught fish there before. It's just dead, nothing's happening. And I could move, just a few miles down the road to another spot and be on and just be killing it. I think on the lakes, it has to do with the fish cycle, where they're moving, as far as
I get that
channels and the shallows.
I'm just talking about the activity level as far as the bite intensity, whether they're taking the hooks in their mouth, whether they're a lot, and then whether the bite goes from like balls down hard, super takes downs to
nothing,
hard, and then almost to absolute nothing. And then 2 days later you do, and I've done this on purpose. So I know the fish are there. I'm still marking them. I still am setting up on my traditional spots, and I stomach it for another 2 days, and then all of a sudden the bite comes back. And then by the third day, it's bite on, and then it wait. But the hard that heavy activity level doesn't seem to last more than about a day or a day and a half for blues. It lasts in the pre-spawn for channel cats. It lasts quite a while. But for blues, it seems that they eat so voraciously all at the same time that that bite window just falls off really hard after a few days, or even after a day and a half. That you're coming for a rock bottom. It's almost like the peak and then the recession. And then
what it reminds me of,
and then it's the recession.
What it reminds me of is when they first come out of their wintering holes and they put that feed bag on, how they gorge themselves. That's what the pattern will do. You can't buy a bite, and then you'll slowly start getting fish to peck around, and they'll kind of nudge the rod. And then when you hit that peak, man, the bite is on. They're slamming the baits, and you may catch a fish that's already got another piece of fish in its mouth. It's like they're trying to cram everything they can in their mouth right there, and they're on a feeding binge, is what I call it.
But for a short window of time. And then they get full because the water's cold. They don't digest very well, and then there's a long period between.
The bite kills off again.
And it maybe lasts an hour or two. Same thing happens with channel cats. I can't say that for flatheads because I'm too far north. They don't even eat in the winter. But it's definitely a weird situation. Something else I noticed is that across the country, and this is my first year on YouTube, so I've been paying attention as hard as I can to as many channels as I can. When my fish were pecking, so was everybody else's. Your fish were pecking. All the fish were pecking. It was like this countrywide. Your fish country boy. They were all pecking, and I'm like, okay, so we got a countrywide situation. My weather is way different than you guys' weather, but yet all the fish on all the channels are pecking and spitting and not really hooking up. There's something to that, but I can't say it because this is my first season watching everybody on YouTube. Okay, I used to talk in a few chats, but yeah.
Yeah. I
I've
have
been
not a
picking up-
clue either.
I've been picking up that same thing where, and a lot of it is from, I fished a lot of the, YouTube tournaments where you got multiple people from across the country, and you'll have your one or two hot spots for. Well, I'll use the Winter Blues tournament this year for an example. Parker Pursuits and Mo Creek Outdoors, they killed it. They caught 30. Well, I don't remember what it was, but they were fishing a power plant lake with a different.
That's artificial. If they're running hot water, it's artificial. It's
That's
tough
exactly-
as rocks if they're not running hot water.
That's
Yeah.
exactly the point that I was coming to. I did the first one with Chad, and it was JP3 was in Kentucky, North Carolina was Patriot James. My wife and I were on the James River. The only fish caught that day were my wife and I caught 2 small blue cats. That was the only bites that day, really, even. Now here we are, so I've been noticing the same exact thing that, of course there's that little, you're going to have the little variation here or there, but I've been noticing that same thing.
It's that weird trend, and this is pretty much the first time I've noticed a countrywide peck problem, if you get what I mean. So if my fish in the middle of Illinois or the northern Illinois and Hook's fish up north of me, and then you guys out on the East Coast, and the guys down in Texas, and the guys in Virginia, and the guys, like lower Virginia, the guys that are in West Virginia, and the guys that are on the Tennessee River, everybody's dealing with pecking fish. There's got to be something to it. Well, there appears to be something to it. This is the first, 3-4 week period that I've seen that happen. So I'm gonna pay attention, and I'll get back to you in about 5 years.
Yeah, because it's
talking
weird to me,
of
'cause
whether this is a real factor or not.
when them fish bit on my last live, I swore that it was little channel cat pecking, but it was not. It was blue cat. And I was like, why? Because normally, even down here, you take a 2-pound blue cat, he'll just lay the rocks over. And I mean, they're very aggressive. So when I seen that pecking, I instantly assumed channel cat, and I was wrong, and I could not figure it out. I was like, why? That's what goes through my mind when something like that happens. My mind is trying to figure out, why are these fish pecking this bait all of a sudden? And it didn't matter if it was bluegill, if it was shad, what the bait was, they were still pecking it.
Yep.
And
so how I proved it to my customers, because I used to take I'd take 40 customers, 40 trips, 80 to 90 customers that were cat fishermen on trips in the pre-spawn. Now, a lot of times in the pre-spawn, it's great guns. They're just smoking the rods down, peel and drag, doing all that stuff. But we have those 10, 15 days a year where those same fish, and I knew they were the same fish because there's no little fish that survive up there. The big ones push them out. CBC's out. So anyway,
no, it's all right.
So the big fish.
I'm just going to get me a drink.
Okay. So the big fish push the little fish out of these tributary rivers, and because they're small, narrow rivers, because it's the thing. And I fished them yesterday, and they were great guns. So next day, so I fished them Wednesday, and it was great. Thursday, they went to pecking, and all my customers could ever say was, well, these are little fish. I said, no, they're not. They said, well, how do you know? I said, well, because I fished them yesterday, and they're like 8 to 10, 12 pounds. For channel cats, that's actually pretty big. And so I wouldn't let them do that very long with me, and before I switched to dime-sized circle hooks and shad guts. So once I switched over to dime-sized circle hooks and shad guts, we didn't catch them all, but we had a better success rate. So that pecking and tapping and all that stuff translated into 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pound fish. And my customers were like, oh, I guess you were right. I said, well, yeah, because I already know, if we were back on the main river and we were on like some like nondescript shallow flat, fine. It might be 2-pounders pecking our baits, but it wasn't. We were in the height of the pre-spawn. We had a cold front move in, maybe the water's dropping, whatever, and they're pecking the bigger baits, and you throw a dime-sized circle hook and bang, there it is. So I've known that, and I've seen that on lives where, blues, because you're in the Potomac, how many channel cats are there? Almost none. So
Yeah.
when blues are pecking, they're not necessarily little 2 to 5 pound fiddlers. They could be 10, 15, 20s. I'm not saying 50s are going to peck with that little bitty, wavelength. If you're going to get a 50 to peck, it's going to be donk, 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 like that. They just won't pull that rod down. So it's refreshing to hear you and CBC talk about these fish, because from experience that they're not necessarily little fish. I love it.
Yeah.
That's a huge learning curve that I've seen happen just in the time I've been in YouTube.
Well, this past stand day that we were getting those boom, boom in the first spot, we were getting the pecks, we were anchored, but it was the big pecks. So
big peck,
they wanted something. They wanted something. They wanted something different. We started doing the drifting, moving that bait where they didn't have the chance, and it was more of the instinct of, hey, my food's getting away, wham. Sometimes it is downsized. Sometimes when you see the pecks, to me that's the signal. Okay, they want something different. Whatever, you got to figure out what that difference is. To me, anyhow, that's what I've been picking up and learning. And
I mean,
I got a question for you. I noticed this year, Tim, fishing shallow water after the freeze and it melted off. Normally in our lake, when you fish a certain area, you'll catch 1 or maybe 2 big fish in an area at a time. You won't catch a whole lot. But this year, right after ice off and stuff, I went out there with some big donkey bait shad heads, and I threw them big baits out there on the same rod in the exact same spot, and I landed 4 fish from 30 to 40 pounds, all within about 2 hours of each other. Just bam, 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 bam. And I was still catching the smaller fish around them, but I could not figure out what made them fish congregate in that one little area like that this time. Because normally they'll be more scattered out, or you may catch one and a couple of hours catch another, but it was just one right after the other. Matter of fact, I had my wife fishing with me, and I kept Fins and Fowl was on the other side of the lake from me, and I kept hooking these fish, and I'm like, I got another one, and my wife was over there yelling, "Shut up!" And, I couldn't figure out. It was just this one area on this shoreline, and I had people fishing right beside me and her behind me that were doing nothing. But there was just something, I don't know, something about that spot, or maybe I was throwing my line out a little farther than they were, but there was something different. And for some reason, them fish were congregated in that one shallow spot that day.
And I can't say for sure what exactly is going on. I can only get close as far as a guess. So it would take way too long than what we have time left to explain why I'm going to say this. But there's a proclivity for, and you saw me doing this a little bit earlier. Okay, so if I had 3 hands, my other hand would be down here, and my other hand would be down here. There's this weird proclivity that I've seen of big blues, especially in cold water, to almost follow each other, one to the other. And I'm not saying I'm magic. I'm nothing. I've seen this stuff. Matter of fact, I had a friend that was doing a college thesis, and he did some diving in like 44-degree water in with blue cat stuff. And this is stuff that never gets published. You don't ever see it. I was just lucky enough to see it. This is back in the VCR days when you had to record on a VCR. I have somewhere like 5 VCR tapes that I don't even know where they're at, of like using an underwater camera when they were still black and white, and you used to have to hold them like this. This is before Aquaview and all this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, when blues, not all the time, they will generally, so you got the tail back here, and then the head here, and then the tail here, and then the head here. And they'll actually sit in daisy chain fashion in the winter for some reason. And you've probably heard that if you read in Fisherman. So there was a DNR guy that did a whole bunch of different studies on cold water catfish, and he talks about the daisy chain. And that's the reason I even called it that, because I recollect that. And I'm saying what I've seen is, for some reason, they end up doing, channel cats will do it too. I got into a basin, like a wintering hole that was only like 12 foot deep. There's an island ahead of it, shallow dumped off into about 12 foot like this. And you literally had to position correctly and get it in just that right line. So I got 6 rods out, and there's only one rod catching them all. And I had to get it on that line to catch this. So, I mean, and I couldn't have it just up at the front. I had to be like a foot and a half down next time. I had to be a foot and a half down, and that just didn't happen in one day. So there is something weird about that. Although I cannot for the life of me formulate any sort of equation that would work, that I could talk about with any sort of certainty. But those odd things do happen.
Now, Country Boy, did that happen on more than one day in that spot, or was it just that one day? Or
just that one day, and them fish were on fire. I couldn't understand it, because when I caught the first one, it was my first big blue of the year. I was all excited. I was pumped up, you know, high-fiving, doing the thing. And I threw the rod out there, and when that other rod, I watched it, it just folded it down. I was like, there is no way. And I reeled it in, and another big one. And I'm so excited. My wife hadn't caught any fish, and she's fishing right there with me. And I was making her take pictures of my fish and stuff. And I yelled, "Babe, I got another one." And she's like, "Shut the hell up." And her off of Jeff Dunham. She was not happy with me. And, you know, if you're catching fish and she's not a happy camper. But I had a guy that come and fished right beside me. Him and his wife showed up, and they come and looked at the fish as I was catching them. And he was out there trying to fish with braid line in these rocks. And she kept telling me he was breaking off. And I carry extra line in my car and stuff with me. And I said, braid's not going to do any good. And I'm like, put this on your reel, and you'll quit breaking them off. And I caught the next 2 big ones, and they still hadn't got a bite. And I don't know how many small ones I caught in between the big ones. They finally just loaded up and left. I mean, I was not making a lot of friends that day, because I literally had people fishing 30 yards from me, and
Not catching a thing. Yeah.
Benson Fowl was in his boat across from me, watching my live stream go on, and he wasn't catching any fish. And
there it is.
tearing them up.
That explains it all, Country Boy. You just stepped on something on the way there. That's all it was.
Yeah. I couldn't understand why it was. And see what threw me off in the rivers. You know, y'all guys are used to, okay, we caught a 30, and maybe a 40 will come along, a 50 and a 60. In the lakes, these big fish are more scattered. You catch them, but you don't catch them on that consistent basis.
True.
The only time I get that consistency,
feast and famine on a lake. Feast and famine.
When I get consistent big fish is when the creeks flood and they rise 3 times, and the fish will start coming out of Red River up them creeks. Well, when the fish come up the creeks, I can go to the creek bank and go out there and start catching them consistent because these fish are pulling up them creeks to spawn that come out of Red River. But in a lake, the fish are very, very scattered. And
So CBC and Stan. So that's why I said at the end of that one video, I said, this is what we do. We come, we go at the right time. We use the right baits. We put the time in, and this is what we do. We catch big fish. And that's like without just saying, hey, everybody, this is what you need to do. You need to go in this time, because it doesn't really matter. It's just where you find the consistent action. You got to remember that, and you got to go to it. And you know what? That's some great advice. I mean, without saying it's great advice, I'm saying it's great advice. But like when I watch you guys' lives, you guys have a lot of great advice that people read as footnotes because it sounds so good, like normal, but they don't. Somebody needs to ring a bell. There needs to be a little bell in the corner, like like right up here, little bell. So when you say something profound, it needs to go ding, ding, ding. You know, like hey, or like a highlight. You know, like it needs to read some stuff because when he's, I mean, I have that little bell in my head, and so when you guys are talking on your lives, I'm like ding, 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 ding.
Yeah,
profound, very important, awesome, great, keeps up with the cat, you know, keeps you on the catfish. You know, I have that little thing going on. So to get back to my boring science stuff, let's just say that I asked, because I was at the Catfish Symposium in 2002, because I think it was 2002 or 2003. It might have even been 2004 or 5. Hell, I don't know. It's been that long ago. But it was in the Quad Cities. So I went there. And back in those days, you couldn't just go. You had to get invited. And I was invited by somebody that was some DNR guy or whatever. And so I asked the leading guy that was kind of in charge of the catfish location stuff. And he did the underwater stuff, and he did the telemetry program stuff. And I had way too many questions. He just wanted to run from me because I had more questions than he had answers. But I ended up talking to him for about 20 minutes, and he's one of the ones that said daisy chain to me. So let's go back to what we were talking about. When CBC said, okay, I got one after the other, kind of in that same area, blah, blah, blah. We see the daisy chain. I said, so here's my question. I said, do you see them like this, like nose to tail, like straight on? And I go, you see them like this, don't you? He goes, yes, I do. And I was like, awesome, because I'd only seen it like twice. Because I filmed it underwater, only in the winter, not in the summer. So make sure everybody doesn't think that blues are all huddled up together, you know, head to tail, except for in the winter. But it's almost like geese flying. It's almost like they use that, you know, just to be a little bit easier. I don't even know what you call it. It's been so long since
drafting.
Yeah, it's almost like they draft each other. And they could even be sitting there in just a little bit of current, and they draft each other. Flatheads definitely draft each other in the winter. So do channel cats. Not all the time, because a lot of times I'll put a camera down, and I couldn't see channel cats except for I'd see an eyeball or a whisker, an eyeball, a whisker, a tail. So I started pointing my camera up, and the channel cats were swimming either counterclockwise or clockwise, like you guys have seen the National Geographic Channel where the hammerheads are all swimming in a big dumb circle.
Yeah.
Channel cats do it too, in these big giant holes in rivers. Not all the time. Sometimes they're huddled up in a mass, and sometimes they swim. And it's okay. So you guys watch flocks of birds every once in a while when they're real tight and they all know how to move at the same time. They're all moving. Channel cats are not moving fast in the winter, but they all have their spatial relationship, and they all just kind of rotate. It's the most beautiful, but yet the most weird. It's almost like you're on the planet Venus. It's really awesome.
Very intriguing, though. You're like, man, what's going on? And you kind of get caught up in the awe of it.
You're talking about that, Tim. And there's a kid here that fishes the James River a lot, and he had one of the things he did last summer was the GoPro under, And I've literally seen it was they were on the sides of rocks, and you could see the blue catfish were like kind of just hung on the side, and there were several of them, just like you said, kind of using each other and that rock.
And the spatial relationship is so cool. It's like catfish almost in anything over 58 degrees, they almost have an aversion to touching each other. It's really weird. Under that, they don't care. They can rub up against each other and it's fine. But in anything over about 60, you see them sort of space, and flatheads get even farther apart. Really kind of, they got a bigger, the hotter the water, the bigger their personal space is. Doesn't matter if it's channel cats, blues, or flatheads, but flatheads seem to separate even more, and they seem to fight more than the other two. And just, I mean, their immune system.
To me, it's fascinating because blues could be traveling like that a lot more than we know.
Yeah.
Because geese, we see the geese. We see when it's above the water, we can see it. But without the
and I've said this for years, Stan. I've said this for years. Where there's one giant, there's usually two, sometimes three. It doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean it for flatheads, but it does mean it for blues, because blues seem to come in pairs. There's been other people catch gigantic blues, over 100 pounds, over 70 pounds, over 80 pounds in pairs. I've done it myself several times. I mean, shoot, we had one anchor in the matter of an hour and a half because it took 40 minutes to land them. We had three blues over 100 pounds. And then in 2007, I talk about it as my top 10, one of my top 10, the top 10 anchor. We had one just under 100 and two over. One was quite a bit over. And then like the small fish was 40. And then the medium fish was the medium two were 60s and 70s. That was all in 2 hours.
Yeah, just 60s or 70s.
I've seen Combat Carl. I've seen him catch, multiple big fish on that Tennessee River back to back. And that's my goal. I want to be able to get on the big rivers and fish because I know I want to go because there's numbers of big fish. I can get on numbers of them, and
all right, David, you gotta keep talking because I gotta find my charger because my phone's.
That's all right,
but I'll find it. I'll listen. I'm
good at talking. I want to fish these big rivers because there's more numbers of big fish. I watch a lot of these channels and stuff to gain knowledge of these river systems. So when I do get the opportunity to go, I'll know more about them. Now, I could go out there and take a boat and go to these rivers, but my first time on the Tennessee River, Ohio River, Mississippi River, whatever river it is, I'm not going to be familiar with that water. So I would rather have somebody else drive my boat or take me out on their boat to get me used to that lake or that river. So I understand, because you have a lot of dangers on the river that you don't have on the lakes. There's a lot of stuff you need to learn as far as safety, the barges, stuff like that on the river. So guys, if you're going to fish a body of water like that, try and get all the information you can from other anglers, other fishermen. If you've got someone that fishes that body of water regularly, don't let your pride get in the way. Let one of these guys take you out on a boat, drive your boat, kind of show you the ins and out of the river. It will make your trip more enjoyable and safer. For instance, Fins and Fowl. I want to get with him, and he comes to one of the lakes that I fish, and I want to spend some time on the boat with him so I can take him and show him areas on the boat that he can get to that have big fishing. So he can go and he can get on these fish, and that will help him out. I don't try and keep the fish for myself. I like to see everyone catch them. And if Fins and Fowl catches a big, gets on a big catfish and sends me a picture, I'm going to be just as excited as
For
he
some
is.
reason, I can't hear anything.
We can hear you loud and clear. Will Green, I have to admit, the only river I want to fish outside of Oklahoma is the Trinity River.
Well, there's a bunch of rivers and lakes, and I'd like
Yep.
to fish all over the place.
There's a bunch of rivers I do too. And I like, Stan, you might be like me. I like to go try places I haven't fished before. And especially if they're not fished by a lot of people. Not a lot of fishing pressure on them. You have no idea what might be lurking under that water.
Well, I'll give you the perfect example. I told you we lived right on a lake, Go out the door, and there was big crappie, big bass, pike, pickerel, and we still went fishing other places just because it was like, all right, I knew that lake to the point where, depending on the weather, the time of year, everything we look. If you wanted to go catch crappie, I could take you on that lake. You go catch crappie. You wanted to catch bass, I could take you and say, okay, that third lily pad from the right, that's where and you'd cast to that one.
Yep.
We knew that body of water so well. It was like, okay, I want to go fish someplace else to know that body of water. And a lot of it is you'll see similarities across the bodies of waters, but each one has their own little differences where it makes it that much more enjoyable to fish those new places.
Hey, I see we got Outdoor Life in Oklahoma in here. Welcome, Outdoor Life in Oklahoma. A lot of your reservoirs kind of go on the same basis. You know what to look for. A lot of your fish pattern is going to be controlled by your depth of water, what time of year it is. That controls the water temperature. The wind direction is big because it controls your bait fish. What kind of bait fish you have in your water. Like these local city lakes by me, they don't have shad in them. They haven't stocked them with shad or anything. There's very few bait fish in them. These lakes, you never caught a bluegill or anything till I started putting them in there and releasing them in there, introducing them into the lakes. Because these lakes used to be great catfish lakes, and they didn't take care of them for about 15 to 20 years. And they got outfished. There was more people fishing than the fish could reproduce and keep up with as far as catfish. And a lot of these lakes had some nice 50, 60, and 70-pound flathead in them. And the city is finally starting to stock some of these lakes again. This year, there's 4 of them, and they allotted $100,000 to where they could spend $25,000 on each one of the lakes and stock them. But I think most of the fish they stocked has went to crappie and sawguy and stuff like that, not to catfish. Well, we're trying to get them to bring the catfish back. And the only reason they agreed to finally start stocking these lakes and stuff is because they lost all that revenue. People quit going out there camping. Yes, Will Green, the Duncan City Lakes, they quit camping and stuff. And it's like I told them, people are not going to come out here and camp if they cannot catch fish. Why would they spend that money and it costs the same amount to camp if they can't fish when they can take their kids to the next town and fish that's got fish for the same amount of money? And so they're finally starting to realize they're losing revenue, and they're trying to take care of these lakes. Sad thing about our lakes down here, other than the amount of fish you keep, there's no regulations. If you catch a 150-pound catfish, you want to kill it, no big deal to them. And see, to me, we had guides that opened up guide services on the lake the last couple of years. And you see them catching a lot of these big fish, and they're keeping them and taking them back to the marina, throwing them on the dock and taking pictures and stuff like this. And it just breaks my heart. It's like, do you know what you're doing to this fishery? You are literally taking life away from this fishery. And pretty soon, you're not going to be able to guide on this lake because all you're going to have is little bitty dink fish. You know,
David, in 20 years, I only had 3 people actually ask me if we could keep fish, if they could keep fish on their trip. And
yeah,
the reason is because nobody really, like I didn't advertise in the back of magazines. I didn't do the, local paper. I didn't do the whatever. And it was basically word of mouth, or they were reading my website or doing that. And they knew I was catch release. So I didn't really have anybody that really wanted to keep fish that actually, there was a few that contacted and said, hey, how many fish can we keep? I said, none. And they're like, well, I'll find somebody else. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You can't, and I wouldn't say none all the time. Sometimes I said, okay, we've got 2 choices. I said, if you want to keep some fish, we can go fish for little fish. And I never had anybody take me up on that, ever. I said, we're not going to catch a smaller fish by attrition or take a 20 out of the big fish spots, blah, blah, blah. I said, I never one time in 20 years did I ever have somebody say, yeah, let's go fish for little fish so I can take some home.
Yeah, these guys
to that point.
These guys are using the pictures of these fish that they're keeping and stuff on their guide trips, and they're promoting their guide business on Facebook. You could still take a picture of that fish and release it back into the water.
That's what I used to do. We used to take it on the water, release the fish, done deal.
Yeah, and see, they're not. They're bringing them out.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, it didn't work out too well for Santee Cooper.
No, it won't. It won't here. This is not near the fishery. Santee Cooper is. We don't have a major river feeding it.
There was 200 guides that cropped up on Santee Cooper, and every one of them was putting 50 and 60 and 70-pound fish on their big fish boards, taking pictures and then killing those fish. And then the trophy fishery kind of went away. There's still a few big fish in there, but you can't just book a trip with any old person on Santee Cooper and expect to catch a 50 or a 70 every time, which you could in like 2000, 2001, 2003, 4, 5, 6. But by 2007, 2008, the big fish were done.
Yeah.
As far as going there one time, booking a trip and going, we went with Joe Dross on my honeymoon and we caught fish over 50 pounds. And that but that doesn't exist now. You could go with the best guys. They still catch 50s to 70s, but they don't catch them every time.
No, but I will give them this. Santee is starting to come back. If they will keep guides on it anymore. If they will keep regulations in place to protect them big fish, it can replenish itself.
And I think that's one of the reasons how things get out of hand, though, is because we're not talking about an action that we do right now affecting it tomorrow. They started taking those big fish out. Well, we know now how long it takes for those big fish to grow back into those big fish. So you start taking out that generation of the breeding. We said it before, the genetics.
Yep.
You're automatically decreasing that, and it takes we don't see the effects as quickly. So people think, well, there's no harm in it because there's big fish everywhere. We can't. But yeah, it does.
You
Every
know
big,
who's going to see the effects, though, Stan?
that's right.
Little Smith, my grandkid,
Yeah.
Epic's grandkids. We've got to do this so that this resource is here for not just our kids, but our grandchildren. If people don't start making it now with the CPR, this resource can be lost. And you know, you know what a thrill it is to catch a big fish. How sad would the world be if people could no longer experience that?
Yeah.
If you could no longer go out, that's like, I hate to get on the subject, but the pay lakes. Man, I did not know anything about a pay lake till I got on the catfish community on YouTube. People were telling me what the pay lakes were doing. I was like, do what? And they're like, oh, it's all legal. And I'm like, how is it legal? And
It's
you know,
it's just not very enforceable because
well, it hurts the fish population.
it does. It hurts the shared natural resource that we all care about. There's not one fisherman that traveled several states away, stayed in a hotel, paid the guide money, paid gas, ate food, and did all that because they thought they were going to be able to catch 20-pound fish.
Yeah.
50 is the mark. 50 is that mark. And, if I get 200 calls, there's not one of them that say, hey, what's your biggest fish you're going to be able to catch on this? If I'd say 20, they're not coming from 3 states away. They're not flying in to Chicago International, or they're not doing that. So I say that the tourism is worth 10 times the amount that the fish flesh is worth, no matter where it goes. So, I mean, that I couldn't go to the nearest national forest and just start cutting down big walnut trees and sell them with a $35 license. That's what it's like. But no one sees catfish. They don't see them like they do their trees in their park near their house. Because there's some great trees in some of those parks. I mean, huge bur oaks, huge white oaks, huge walnuts.
The redwoods.
$35 license, just go cut them down one night and haul them off to the nearest sawmill. I'd be doing great.
Yeah, redwoods the size of your house.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because no one sees them, and we haven't given it a voice enough. We haven't went to Congress. We haven't went to this. We haven't stomped our feet down.
Yeah. Epic, I got a question from Polar Bear.
All right.
He wants to know what hook size you would recommend for a channel catfish.
Where am I fishing? Am I fishing the Red River of the North, or am I fishing a normal river in what part of the country? Does anybody know where Polar Bear fishes?
I think he's Ohio.
Yeah, I think so too.
4 to 5/0 is plenty.
4 to 5/0.
Yep, 4 to 5/0. What I call Daiichi Circle Chunk Light. You can find them at Walmart. It's the Team Catfish or even the Eagle Claws or even what. Yep, 4 to 5/0 is plenty. One thing about channel cats: thin wire. Don't go with thick wire, because the thick wire has a problem with those little, the super corner of the mouth, the whisker hooked fish.
Yeah.
Thin wire is fine. You don't have to have as much pressure. It's good. As long as you go with a thin wire hook, 4 to 5/0. Sometimes you want to go down to 3/0. And sometimes you want to go to a dime size, which would be a 1/0. But you got to have special bait for that. You got to have like little tiny shad heads or whatever that's pretty fresh.
I have tons of hook in my tackle box, but I do not have any hook smaller than an 8/0.
Polar Bear, if you're fishing for, channel cats that are stocked, like a lot of times they'll stock like city ponds with like the channel cats and whatnot, where you're talking about your 2-pound, 1-pound channel cats and stuff. Yeah, a 2/0 to 3/0. But I use here in the James, I use 4 to 5/0 channel cat hooks, and we catch everything from 1-2 pounders up to 16, 17 pound channel cats on a 4-aught hook or a
I've
5-aught
caught
hook.
80-pound flatheads on 5-aught hooks and
Yeah.
3-inch live shad. When it's necessary, when those flatheads are hitting and spitting fast, especially on bigger baits, especially scaly baits, I've had to switch down. And it's not an accident. Like Stan, I targeted those fish because I knew what was going on from the day before. I knew what was going on in the morning. So I said, okay, I'm going to take 4 to 5 inch shad. And I'm telling you, there's been times when I've hit 7 fish in a row on the same rod because 7 big flatheads, not 80s, but 25s to 40s on the same rod with the same type bait, and I just had to get it small enough and shiny enough when it's going like that. And I'm not saying everybody will be able to pick up on that because they're not out on the water, which I'm not either anymore. I don't go every day, day after day after day. It's harder for me, honestly, to be on fish if I'm not out there every day. I'll do the things I think is right, and I might end up wasting the first 2 or 3 hours. Usually, if I'm on it last night and I sleep in my truck and I have customers the next day at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm on fish because I know where they're at, blah, blah, blah. But they will move, and they, that activity level move and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So if I'm a weekend fisherman now, so, I mean, I've got to go through my paces. I've got to go through most likely. So pattern A, pattern B, pattern C. And usually within those 3, I'll get on to fish. But like last weekend when I went with Sean, it was rough. We couldn't get to the deep water. It was so shallow. My jet couldn't even get to the deep water. We couldn't go below the first rock pass. The first rock pass, the rocks were sticking out of the water like dump trucks. And there wasn't 7 feet to get through them. So I had to launch upriver and try to go down to them. Well, I couldn't get down, so I fished all the shallow, super clear water. We caught fish. We probably caught 15 channel cats from 2 pounds to 50. Yeah, we didn't catch any 15s, maybe 9. But it just is what it is. But I knew by pattern 1 that I needed to go to deep water because I already eliminated a lot of the other stuff that is normally good. It just didn't have enough depth for them at that clarity and that early part of the year. Now, 2 weeks from now, they'll all be up in that. I mean, this much water is enough to catch a 15-pound fish as long as it's fast enough in 2 weeks because the height of that spawn is coming. There's trees sitting there. There's trees where they're sitting in 1.5 feet of water. If there's no current on it, it's no good. But if there's current on it, it's good. It'll hold 9 to 15-pound fish consistently, and it'll hold multiples. But it was too early, too shallow. They all moved down deep, and I know that because I fished it so many times between April 28th and which is very cold water for us. All the way up to, second week in May. And if it's cold nights, they'll filter down into that deep, deep water, like 15, 20, 25 foot of water, which is small pockets in this river. But then the next day, if it warms up, the water comes up a little bit. They're
right back out
up into that fast water stuff. And it might be a mile away. They'll all filter down a mile, and they'll all filter, not all of them, but most of them will filter down a mile, and most of them will filter back. The active fish will. So it becomes predictable if you can fish it all the time, but it's difficult if you're biting into a lot of the humanistic stuff. If you're fishing just on a weekend, maybe one day or one afternoon. So, I can see why people say, well, a lot of it's luck. Well, a lot of it isn't luck if you have the proclivity, the time, and the energy to do it. But if you're stuck on the weekends and stuck fishing docks on a lake, there's a lot of it luck.
Yeah. Jim, that's a good question. You mentioned water clarity too. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed a difference in water temperature on lakes that have clear water versus lakes that have muddy, stained water?
Huge. It's huge. The clearer the water is, the colder it will be.
Yep.
Because the solar reaction on clear water is almost none on the water itself. It has to go through the rock, through the water, and warm the bottom, and then it's a radiation effect. It's a radiant effect. So, but if you have stained or muddy water, it will warm the water itself. It's like a solar collector. Oh yeah, and I know this because the Illinois River itself isn't all that deep, but it's dirty water because it comes off farm ground. And then I have tributaries that are clear water tributaries that come from basically groundwater, and they will be up to 6 to 10 degrees colder than the main river.
Yeah.
But I also have figured out that it's not necessarily water clarity or water temperature, because if there's enough water piping into that clear water that's colder piping into the main river, it will attract fish up there because of their spawning instinct, and they will go from the warmer water into the colder water in vast numbers. I mean, vast numbers, enough to catch 100 channel cats in a day in like a 7-mile stretch. But yet you go to the main river and you're only going to catch 20.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but there's times that I've been out and I've been sitting there and the bite may not be all that great, but it's consistent, and it'll start to rain and you'll have one of them warm rains. And when that warm rain is hitting that lake and it starts heating that water up, you'll see the bite start increasing.
And lakes seem to be exaggerated on all fronts. It's almost like, okay, you'll notice that a little bit on a river, but you'll notice it more on a lake, like that rain bite or that low pressure bite, or when that weird, temperature system comes in, it'll shut the bite down harder sometimes on a lake than it will on a river. And you'll also see a situation where you'll go to a lake that they'll bite almost anything. I mean, almost anything with gusto. I mean, you throw a leopard frog, from a salamander to a swallow to a dead robin to a piece of garter snake to a whatever, and they're eating it all. But yet you go to a river that's only 15 miles from it, and they're pecking shad if it's just a little bit too old. Then you got to go get fresh shad. You said it about perfectly when you said, all right, I'm kind of full right now, but if my wife brings something tasty to me while I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm often equated with that. And I wasn't in the chat, I wasn't up here when I heard that. And I just smiled because I said, and that's the rest of the story right there. That is the rest of the story. Because
I get a lot of questions from people, and they're like, bumping's getting real big. And they're like, and they also ask a lot of people, does dragon baits work? There are times when dragging baits can be fire. But that's from the boat. From a bank, you don't have that advantage or a way of doing that. Definitely, on the bank, you gotta try and make that fish come to you, or figure out a way to get to that fish. When they're drifting baits and dragging baits, that's exactly what they're doing. And a lot of times on them holes, them catfish, they'll come up and they'll stage right on the tip of that before it comes out onto the shelf of that flat. And they'll be right on the top of the edge of that hole, suspended. And a lot of times, them guys are just dragging that bait by there, and it gets in front of that fish. And even though he's not like moving, actively feeding, if you get that bait close to him, he's going to hit it. And
sometimes you literally have to get it within a couple inches of their face or drag it on their face. And there's the crux. The crux is Are you presenting a bait that a fish is willing to get up and move, or are you taking it right to him as he sits on his couch, like a nice little piece of pie? And
Yep.
you go, no, like that. And, that's what that is. That is exactly what it is. In 1999, my wife and I got married here in Illinois, and we went to North Carolina, and we drug Santee Cooper with Joe Drost, and I explained that a little bit earlier. To go out on Santee Cooper and to go out in that 25 foot to 30 foot with, big waves and all that stuff, to just sit there and anchor didn't make a lot of sense. But dragging baits like we did, we caught a lot of good fish.
Yeah.
And
Hey, JV.
we passed a lot of good fish, but we caught a lot of good fish.
Yep.
But
Hey,
still,
Garrett, welcome.
I still cannot make myself drag or drift on much besides a lake, because I feel way more comfortable presenting a bait that has done well for me in the past in ambush fashion. I'm like the assassin bug.
Yep.
The assassin bug, or the whatever. I wait for my prey. I set up on either holding spots or travel zones, or little contours, and I kind of pick that whole thing apart. I'll
Hey,
set up
fishing
on,
chick.
I'll set up on areas that I know that maybe there's 2 mile of unobstructed river, and then all of a sudden it comes to a high rise, and it's obstructed by maybe a wing dike or maybe a sunken ship, or maybe these fish live under a sunken ship. Just like sometimes I fish stuff about half as big as my house. It's down underneath the water, but I'm maybe fishing over top of it and dropping big baits behind it. But that's what I like. Now, if I had to go out and do like tournaments or whatever, you bet your butt I would be dragging. Because if I'm going to fish places I don't even want to fish, and there's no cover or structure, and there's just loose fish hanging everywhere,
I'm
you gotta
locating
drag.
them. Yeah.
I mean, you have to have that in your arsenal. But I would, like, I could care less if I ever fished a power plant lake again in my life. I don't want to fish another power plant lake. River Certified thought it was great. So,
Yeah.
He just thought it was awesome. I'm like, what are you? Yeah, and he's like 4 hours from the nearest power plant lake that's got blues. Well, I'm only an hour. I never fish the things because they're so picky, so whatever. And hook catfish, he fishes them, but he fishes so much that he can hit those right days, and I just don't have that time to, because like I would try to guide on them, but there'd be days I'd be like guiding for free. I'd be like, nope, doesn't cut the mustard. Blah blah blah.
They'd be like, "Where's the fish?" You'd be like, "I don't know. You tell me, and we'll go look for it."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've done drug over 300 of them, and they won't bite. I don't like that. Don't. Like it at all.
I know on the lakes here, I know on the river, young guys look for anything that breaks the current, whether it be logs or a barge or anything like that. On these lakes, I kind of do the same thing, but I'm looking. It could be a small island, it could be a point, a rock, dirt, whatever it be that comes out. When that wind's coming across it, it's moving the bait fish. And a lot of times, big fish will sit on the back side of that and just wait for that bait to come to them. So anything in these reservoirs and stuff that you find that's breaking the current, it's a good spot to fish.
Now,
I like.
You know why
like
that is? You know why that is, David?
They ambush them.
No, why are the bait fish there?
Well, in the wind with the lake, the wind controls the plankton and stuff that the shad eat. So the shad are following that, and the active feeding catfish are following that.
There
Not
you go.
not every fish is going to move. but the fish that are feeding and active, they're going to follow that bait fish, and that's the fish.
Hey, Stan, I could write a test like a catfish quiz for David here, and he would get an A+. I'm telling you, he would. I could give him like top billing, like one of the hard. I wouldn't fill it with a bunch of scientific Latin names, but I could say, okay, so why are the plankton right there? What are the two kinds of plankton? By the way, you guys know what the two kinds of plankton are?
Nope.
So we got zooplankton, and then we got phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is, and they're both animal plus vegetable hybrids. Both of them are, except for the zooplankton actually has its own form of movement, and that's what crappie and bluegill and all that stuff like. Now the Asian carp and all that, they like the phytoplankton. Phytoplankton grows more like a mushroom or a jelly.
Wow.
It barely moves and it kind of floats. But the little zooplankton, they're little, simple-celled organisms. So it's mostly the phytoplankton that the shad are eating. Algae that's floating, algae that's stuck to things, and then the phytoplankton, which gets affected by the wind. And I'm impressed, David.
And it also gets
boys welcome.
And that also gets affected by, you hear people talk about barometric pressure and the drop. That affects those smaller organisms first, too. So that's why.
Yes, we're welcome.
I would have to say the barometric pressure, and also the cold does, because you hear everybody complain about shad being deep. Not only are the shad deep, but the phytoplankton hasn't bloomed. So they're down there dealing with algae and zooplankton, which zooplankton doesn't depend on the sun as much as phytoplankton does. So you got those blooms every single day.
That's what made it nice when our lake flooded. When our lake flooded and it got up into that fresh green grass, them shad were up in that flooded grass, and you couldn't throw your cast net out. You just throwed it right on top of the ground.
Nice.
And I was able to catch some shad. But as soon as they dropped that water back down, bam, them shad were gone. And I don't freeze my shad or nothing. I try and catch them fresh that day and catch me enough to fish with. And man, then they dropped that lake so quick, they were gone. And that thing about catfishing, if you don't have bait, you're not fishing.
No. And sometimes you can have a bait that's like second or third on the list and still do okay. Last time Sean and I were out, we couldn't find a single shad in that whole system. And I know where the shad live, and they just weren't there. And it's been a while since I've done the pre-spawn thing.
Yeah, see, and I prefer shad.
Have to go.
I prefer shad even over bluegill, but I wasn't able to catch no shad, so we caught a few bluegill. And I was like, man, I'm going fishing. And I had some that were live, and some of the big ones, I used them for cut bait. And I was really surprised. It didn't seem to make a difference. They were hitting the bluegill. They were hitting the cut bluegill. And I was kind of nice. And
those are the days you like. The days when you're not picky.
What's strange about that, Epic, I was there the day before. And, man, everything I threw out, the shad, the bluegill, it did not matter. I was catching these huge 4-foot alligator gar.
Really?
I couldn't even throw my cast net out at the bank because I was catching alligator gar. And I even caught them on a 10-aught circle hook. And I'm like, how are they getting that circle hook? And
so where's your video on that?
I didn't take a video. I got some pictures of them though. I think I sent them to Stan. And man, I went out there and I was going to target a flathead with them live bluegill, and I could not beat the gar off my line. They hit live bluegill, cut bluegill. They hit live shad. They hit cut shad. Like I could not beat the gar off. And then the day after that, I went. When they dropped that water, them gar were gone, and the
Done.
catfish would go back in.
Yep. Dropping water is a difficult thing. I mean, you can be in a situation where there's thousands of catfish within a square mile. They start dropping that water. Those catfish are still there because they're still there to do their spawn, but they'll clam their mouths up.
Yep.
Been through it many times, and so is everybody else. That like in Alabama, everybody knows if they're dropping the water, you just stay home.
Well, guys, I hate to end this, but
Yeah,
my wife is going to kill me. We've been on here 3.5 hours.
really.
I told her it'll just be an hour, babe, and it's 3.5 hours later.
Stan knows if the whole Epic Catfish is on here, we're gonna keep talking.
It wasn't just you though, Epic. Stan would come on and he'd come on random and he's like, we're just going to have a short live stream. 6 hours later, we were still going.
It's not just me.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, get Stan, me, and you together, it might be like a 12-hour thing.
Oh, I could go on this all day.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing Creo wasn't up here with us. It wouldn't be shutting off right now.
I know.
I know.
Hey, Creo's not that far from me. Creo's over here in Louisiana. He's not that far from me. I may try and get over there with the Cajun brother and do some fishing on that river with him.
Oh, you should, because if I was close, I'd already been there.
Yeah,
man, I can be where Creo's at in 8 hours.
Check it
If
out.
I let my wife drive, if I let my wife drive, I could probably be there in 4.
I've checked out. I want to go fishing down with Creo. It's like family me because that's where I originally was from. Is down there. So I've checked flight prices down there and everything already. So I'll be there one of these days. But
I'm close enough. I could drive, and while I'm down there chasing,
I could be there in 12 hours. If I let my wife drive, we could be there in 20 hours.
No, my wife is a speed demon.
No,
my wife scares me when she drives.
Before David forgets to do it, before Country Boy forgets to do it, 9:00 Wednesday nights.
Yep.
Country Boy show. It's going to be Fishing 101. I know I'm glad to come on anytime he wants. Epic, but he's going to be having some guests. What you've heard tonight is you're going to get a lot more of that. You're going to get a lot more fishing basics, whether it's catfishing or just fishing in general. Any questions?
I'm going to try and get people like Lyle and Mark from Catfish and Crappie, people that bait fish, that catch panfish, crappie, stuff like that. Not just the catfish. I'm going to try to do a lot of bank fishing, but I will also do the kayak and the boat fishermen. I would love to get Stan 3 on because
get Stan 3 on there.
Well, Stan 3, there's a lot of people that have bank fished for a long time, and this kayak catfishing is taking over. So there's people trying to transition into that. And Stan 3 has already made that transition. So he has a lot of knowledge, and he would be able to help people make that transition a lot smoother and a lot easier.
If a dang log would float, if he could put his fishing stuff out on a log and go catch fish from it, he'll do it.
I know. Well, Stan 3's like a big fish magnet. Y'all got it. Even when y'all got him on the boat, well, this is my fish, and Stan 3's like, I'll get whatever, and sure enough, he gets the big one, and you're gonna have to quit letting him reel in all the big ones, Stan.
But hey, that's what life's all about, you know. I enjoy, like I said, if I'm one of those people, I'm kind of weird. I want people around me to catch. I'm happier when the people around me are catching bigger fish than I am. I honestly am.
I get excited. My goal is to get my wife on a 20-pounder. She's hooked into some big ones and lost them. She's new to this big catfishing, and I want to get her on a big fish. And to me, that's my ultimate goal this year. I would at least like to see her catch a 20-pounder.
And now you got Stan 3 is out there, and he's talking with Dan from Green Machine Outdoors on
Yeah.
the daily basis, and they're already planning trips and talking things. So it's just gonna go from there. So
Yeah.
it's great to see. I
And
can't wait.
Epic, I got your number that you sent me in the email the other day.
Very good.
I will definitely be calling you because I would definitely like to have you up as a guest
Okay.
because you have so much information you can share to educate people.
I'll invite
No.
Heroes over too. He can come over and we can talk
Yeah.
to him. He does flatheads from like in a canal. He does all kinds of stuff. I was going to say, we were just talking about who's catching the biggest fish. I almost didn't catch that epic super monster. I tried to get Garrett, my oldest son, to take it, and he's like, "No, Dad, it's your turn," because we'd caught 2 fish before that above the
Yeah.
dam. So Garrett caught the first one, Connor caught the second one, then it was my turn because in that spot, that was the first rod that went down.
Hey, it looks like Haslife showed up.
Hey,
He must
And
just
George
ended his
Ray.
live.
Guys, y'all's just in time to see us kill it.
Epic, hang on when the show ends here.
okay.
And I thank y'all for coming in tonight, and it was
Yeah.
great. This many people come in on Country Boys on David's first just the intro to his show, kind of here.
And
It means a lot to me.
fans of both your channels.
I am too, and this would not have been possible without the help of Stan.
That's right.
Stan really helped me a lot. I didn't even know how to post it, schedule it, or anything. Stan has really helped me, and I can't thank him enough.
Yeah, you can. You just keep doing it. Just keep doing what you're doing, getting that word out there to people, and helping people out.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
That's all I want.
Hey, David, I barely knew how
Yes,
to
sir.
turn my phone on when Stan got a hold of me, and I was doing lives with Stan in my hotel room 7 hours from my house.
Yeah.
Walking
Tim, I'm
around
the same
parking
way.
lot.
They call these smartphones because it's got all that GPS and stuff on them. I know how to call you, and I know how to text you.
There you go.
Other than that, I don't know. My wife gets so mad. I'll be like, "Babe, how do I get into my email?" And she'll show me, and I'm like, "What's the password?" And she's like, "Don't you remember anything?" I was like, "No."
Nope.
I went fishing, and I got sick out at the lake, and I knew I was not going to be safe to drive. So I called my wife, and I said, "Babe, you need to come get me." So her and my second to the oldest daughter, they start out there, and they're like, "You need to tag your GPS coordinates so we know where you're at." And I was like, "I don't know how to do that." They're like, "Okay, open your Facebook, go into this, share your location." And I didn't know anything, and I shared my location, and they're like, "Okay." Well, then I exited out of it. Well, then they called me back because apparently, if you don't leave that on, they can't track you. And it's definitely a learning experience.
You
Yeah,
know, I wish some of my friends that I've like taught and we learned from each other for like 30 years. I wish I could invite them on things like this, but this is what you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Caught some
Well,
fish. You know, I mean,
I'm
that's
just so
about-
glad that
as far as, you know, lingually, as far as describing that, no, wealth of information. They can catch fish great. And I know
Yep.
some commercial fishing guys and tournament anglers and all these guys, but they don't, a lot of them aren't talkers at all. I mean, they're
no.
pretty stoic.
Well, and I understand some people like you have has in them, you know, the minute someone sees their location and where they're at,
Oh yeah.
everybody flocks to it and fishes it.
Yep.
It's different with me because I have so many different lakes around me, and the lakes are so big. If someone's in my spot, I'll go find me another spot because I know the different areas on that lake where the fish should be. You know,
Yep.
a lot of people, they only know that one spot and they'll fish that same spot every time they go, no matter what the weather
Yeah.
is, what conditions. They just don't know. They're like, man, I don't catch fish. I was like, you're not moving. The biggest thing to catch fish, guys, you got to be where the fish are. You know, if they're not there and that's not where they're going to be, you can sit there all day long. They're not going to magically just appear on that hook.
Not usually. It's very rare to set up in a spot that there is no fish and wait for fish to come to you. I've tried it. I know.
Yep.
Terrible.
Yep.
It's just
Number one and two rules of fishing: you got to fish in the water, and you got to fish where they're at.
That's right. That's right.
And have bait.
And then there's about 17 other things that come on the backside of that. Yeah.
Yep. Hey,
Well,
I see Aaron with Catfish Regulators is back in.
Yeah, Aaron, I'll message you in a little bit. I'll have that for you.
How many do we
Staying
got
up.
still?
I have no idea.
Okay. I don't even.
How many?
It doesn't-
And
It doesn't
yeah.
show
yeah,
on mine.
no one but us three. That's it.
Yeah.
I've like rewatched some where they're all trying to fire questions at me, and I'm just a guest. I don't see it. I don't see one of them.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wish I could answer that. Sometimes I do in the comments or whatever, but yeah, they're like, "Hey, Epic, what about this?" I'm like, I didn't see that.
If you would stay on Epic after and
I'll stay
talk
on.
a little bit, but
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take this time to thank everyone for coming in. I appreciate everybody. Come back same time next week, 8 Central, 9 Eastern. We'll do this again. And I love y'all guys. I appreciate y'all. And it'll keep getting better from here, guys. Thanks, everyone.